this computer. There we go. As much as I love to talk about Lenormand, talking about the same thing that right in a row is not so fun. Oh, does it show you guys? Wow, now I can like put some of the blame on you if we aren't recording one time. Like, where were you not telling me that we were recording, or we weren't recording? That is good to know. I really didn't know that. Okay, great. Well, there we've got some second backup checks then. I don't know, Karen. I didn't know that it showed you guys. It may only be like on a computer, or maybe if you're on an iPad, it doesn't show. It depends probably on how, maybe what format you're using to watch. I'm not sure. That's exciting to know, though. I'm going to start holding people accountable when we have snafus. So we're going to talk about the 9 card, and the 9 card to me is the bread and butter of Lenormand, because it's fantastic, quick way. As I've said before, when we talk about the 2 card and the 3 card, which are all part of the 9 card, I don't ever lay down 2 cards or 3 cards. I always either lay a 9 card, because it is a quick way to read. It's just as quick, in my opinion, and once you get comfortable, it's just as quick as laying down 3 cards or 5 cards, but you have so many different more options to dig into if for whatever reason you get an answer and you're kind of like, there's so many different ways then to start to dig deeper and get layers, that I just never pull anything less than a 9 card. And reading a grand tableau is just reading a series of 9 cards. So there's lots of other steps that you can do with a grand tableau, but in the end, you're really just looking for a significator card and looking at the cards that are touching it, looking over here for another significator card and looking at the cards around it. And so when you get comfortable with a 9 card, it completely opens up a grand tableau to being a fun experience, in my opinion, to be able to read, and not so overwhelming as I think a lot of people find grand tableaus to be. So I would really suggest, now I will say every once in a while, I might do an as above, so below with another deck, and then I might pull 3 cards, which I just had done recently. But in terms of somebody asking me a question, the smallest thing that I ever pull is a 9 card. And again, once you're comfortable, it is really quick, because you don't have to do every little step that we're going to talk about today. You can just, because maybe you're just going for past information and you're just going to look at the past. Maybe you're just looking at forecasting where things are heading, and you look to the future. So it can be as quick or as in-depth as the question has needs of being. So let me go ahead, now that we know we're recording, let me go ahead and share. As is usual, I like to get through the luxury part and then get the cards on the table, which is the fun part for me. Although I do enjoy a good lecture. Let's see, go here, share, hit play. Let's take your guys' faces off of there for now, just so that you're not recorded. And let me reopen chat. There we go. As usual, I don't pay a lot of attention to chat because it gets me off, and then we really get into time constraints because I'm not staying at least on track. But I sometimes will see if something relevant to what we're looking at comes up. But if you have a question, please go ahead and type it in there, because we will look back. Okay, so the basis, we talked a little bit about this last week, but we need to spend some more focused time here. The basis for reading a 9 card is significator cards. So Lenormand is a system that heavily is based on significator cards, understanding that not only does each of the cards have a meaning to them, so that you're reading them as a meaning, but each of the cards can represent something in a question. And getting comfortable with that and identifying before you do the reading identifying where you're going to be looking for something is really key for especially reading a grand tableau, because there are two aspects of Lenormand that make this important. One is that Lenormand is a system that is based on significator cards, as I just said. The second is that Lenormand is a system based on proximity. So which cards are close to significator cards are what's important. So when we lay out the 36 cards, all 36 cards of Lenormand can't be relevant to every single situation at every single moment in time. So when you lay out a grand tableau, you're not going through these one by one by one by one by one and reading all 36 cards. You are finding out where is the significant information and looking at the cards that are closest to that. So in order to do that, you have to have chosen your significator cards. And I would argue that you need to have chosen those before you do the reading. This is for the sake of clarity, right? And after a while of working with Lenormand, you just kind of build in, it starts to make sense. And you just sort of, okay, yeah, I'm going to be doing a question about school, so I'm going to go probably to the book card. Some people might go to the tower card for institutional learning, that kind of thing. And so it's important, though, to determine that before you lay it down, because then it stops our mind from saying, okay, I'm going to do a question about school. So I lay all the cards out, and I'm like, and again, I don't think we will naturally be sitting there thinking this, but our brain can be going, okay, well, I could use a tower. Ooh, those cards look a little bit crappy. Oh, let's go over here and look at the book card, because that looks like a little bit better situation. Or the love card. You know, if you think about relationships, you can look at the ring card, you can look at the heart card, and you can look at the significant other card. If you don't line that out beforehand, what you're doing, the same sort of thing can happen in our brain. Okay, is this relationship going to work out between me and so-and-so who I'm massively in love with? I'm not really sure if they are massively in love with me. And we lay all the cards out and we say, oh, that one, that's not looking too good. I'm going to pick this one over here because this says what my heart desires. It's really easy for that to happen quite quickly. And so I'm a big proponent of laying out in your head, say, okay, for me, this is how, and we're going to talk more about this, but just as an example, the heart card is about love. It's often what I use if somebody has a question about finding love, or if they're just starting out a relationship, but it's just at that beginning stages, they don't really know where it's going. I'll go to the heart card. If somebody's currently in a relationship, especially a committed relationship, they may be married, they just might be boyfriend, girlfriend, girlfriend, girlfriend. They're in it, they're in an attached relationship. Then I'll look to the ring card, because now it doesn't mean you can't also look at the heart card, but the main relationship cards, I'm going to look around the ring card. If they then of course you're also going to look at their significant other. I don't often look at the significant other card when somebody's just looking for a relationship, because there isn't anybody currently in sight, energetically in sight. And so I'm not going to look at the significant other. I might look at that in a more general sense of what sort of energy they're looking for, or what sort of issues may be swirling around what it is that they're looking for, those types of things. But for the most part, if they're looking for love, or just at the beginning of just having met somebody, it's the heart card, and it's ring if they're actually in a relationship. If it's both, and let's be honest, as a professional reader, that might come up, where they may be in a relationship, committed relationship, but they have some feelings for somebody else. Then of course I would look to both for the different, how those things might interrelate and interconnect. If there's an interest in someone but not, I would go for the heart card. Or if it's a specific person like that, you could certainly go with a significant other, as long as you lay that out. Again, in my head, it's about, you can do anything you want. You could pick a completely different card entirely, like the child card, which is a new, something new and something blossoming. So you could pick any card, so long as, I think, in your head as you're shuffling, you're like, okay, this is literally what I'll do. I'll be shuffling. I'm like, okay, so the question is X, Y, Z. This person has a job and they're curious about what's going on around their work, but they're also building a side business, which for me is the moon card. So I'm going to be, I'll talk this out in the video, so I can tell the person as I'm doing the reading. I'm going to be looking at the anchor card for work. I'm going to be looking at the moon card for your secondary business. I'm going to be looking at the ring card for the relationship that you're currently in, but then I'm going to go over and take a peek at the heart card because you're having some attraction feelings for somebody else, and kind of trying to figure out how to process that. We're going to go over here. So I literally will say, what are the significant cards that I'm going to approach? And that focuses your brain in. And it also, if you're reading for somebody else, allows them to have confidence that you're reading that way, not just sort of grabbing things here and there and everywhere, but that there's a specific intent in what you're doing. That's a very good question, Wendy. Wendy says that in some decks, so some modern decks have two female cards and two male cards. So yes, you could. I don't do it, I'll be honest. I was really excited, and I do like that people do that, especially for people who are reading for themselves. So I like when a deck creator offers two males and two females, because if you're reading for yourself and you're a female and you're significant, who you're going to be significant to you is going to be another female, I would just remove the other cards and have, excuse me, two female significator cards in there. Vice versa, if you're a male and your significant other is going to be a male, then I would go ahead and just take out the female card and have two male cards in. If you're somebody who, I would say this, if you're somebody who you're a male or female and your significant other could be either or, you don't have preferences, it's whatever comes along the way, I would probably just leave the opposite in and just have that be relating to whoever is going to be significant to you. It doesn't matter. If you're reading for others, however, I don't find it to be all as useful, because I don't ask of people, and I read from people from a lot of different countries. So oftentimes the name itself is not an indicator of gender. And I certainly don't ask people who they prefer, the sexuality of who it is that they prefer as a significant other is. I don't consider that to be my business unless that's offered to me. So I don't ask what your gender is when you do a reading with me, and I don't ask the gender of your significant other. So most of the time I know what your gender is. I don't mean your, but I generally know, for the most part, what somebody's gender is, and I just simply say at the beginning of the reading, this is a system from the late 1700s to the 1800s, at a time in which conventionally male and female relationship is what was considered to be the norm. And so this is how the deck is created. You're being represented by this card over here. This man is going to be representing your significant other. Whether it's a male or female doesn't matter. This is just whoever you're open and receptive to. And I just line that out. I've never had any kind of kickback from that. Now, my deck that I created has, which we'll look at in a minute, has just a querent card and a significant card. You're always the querent, and the other person is always the person that you're open and receptive to being significant to you. So it just takes gender out of the equation, which works very well for me as a professional reader. It doesn't matter, because it really doesn't matter in the long run. So for you as as if you're reading personally for yourself, you can do any of those above, either because a lot of decks don't have those extra cards, right? A lot of beautiful decks, a lot of classic decks, even some modern decks that are, just stunning decks that you might want to use don't provide, and because they just keep it as a traditional Lenormand. And so I wouldn't let that personally stop you from enjoying some beautiful decks. I would just be, understand this is a system that comes out of this particular paradigm, and you're a male, take the male card. The female card just means it's the other significant card. It's whoever you're open to being receptive to, and it doesn't matter what the picture says on there. So I wouldn't personally let that stop you from enjoying a deck, unless it just shuts you down. If you see that and you're like, okay, that irritates me, then look for those decks that do have multiple males, multiple of each of the genders. Sometimes they'll even do race. I've got to remember, I need to try to find, there's a couple that also do race. Not as many, unfortunately, have like a variety of race. This is also one of those things that you have with issue with tarot. Tarot came out of Italy and France at a certain time period in which you've got a lot of white people. Lenormand came out of Germany, and you have a lot of white people, and a lot of the decks are going to either look like those classic decks and haven't done a lot until you start to get into the really recent decks, where you might see that start to change up a little bit. But as a whole, especially if you're looking at historical decks, they are not going to be diversive. This is the culture in which they came out of. So let's continue on forward. I just wanted to get that basis out, why it's really important to know your significators. Prentice asked, do you use a significator just in the 9x9 and Grand Tableau? I do not. I mean, I use it in, as we talked about last week, if I'm doing a 3 card for whatever reason, and we'll talk about it a little bit more when I can throw things on the table. But as I did in some of the example, I think it was maybe the last example option of doing like a line card, I still, if I'm going to do 3 card or 4, 5 card or 7 card, I still know what my significator is. I search for it in the deck, and I pull 2 cards before and 2 cards after it. So I'm a person, and this is a personal choice, who for me, the significator card and proximity is the key feature for me for Lenormand. So every draw that I do I pull that in some way. I am finding the significator card and seeing what cards are close to it. So it can just be in the 9 card, or it can be a feature that you access no matter what how many cards you lay down on the table. So that's a good question. So we talked about the gender issue factor that we have with this being a male-female binary from the 18th, 19th century. And I talked about how most people who are purchasing, even as a professional reader, most people purchasing a Lenormand reading know that that's the case. And so, again, I've never had somebody that has been offended by using a classic deck and just explaining and just laying that out. I, of course, often am using my own deck, so that issue is taken away by the way that I did my particular deck. There is a tradition, some traditions get around this issue by using other cards. So, for example, the dog or the snake become the significant other that is a female. So if you have a female reader or querent and you need her significant other to be a female, instead of using the male card, they'll use the snake card. Or for if you're a man and your significant other is a male, instead of using the female card, they will use the dog card. That to me is very problematic in the fact that it assumes that we don't have the ability to think through and process, right? I think that we're perfectly capable as human beings and as readers to understand here's a male and a female. Yes, this was the norm and the dichotomy at the time the deck was made. I can use this card to represent anything that I want, whether that's a male or female. I'm pretty sure we can all make that connection, that understanding, right? The other is because the issue is that you're now removing the dog and the snake or the snake from showing up in the reading in a significant way, doing its particular job. So you will sometimes see that in texts, books and things where they're like, well, if it's a significant male and you're a male, you can pick XYZ different cards. So those are why, though, it's important for you to take the time to think about those things, to think about how, again, it's simplified if you are just reading for yourself because you're just making that decision for, okay, I'm a male, I want to use multiple decks, my significant other is a male, this is how I'm going to address it in the historical deck, this is how I'm going to address it. Obviously, if they provide you multiple cards, that makes it a little bit easier. If you are going to read for other people, it becomes more complicated, and I think even more important to just have a set understanding of how you're going to do that and how you're going to approach it. So any of these ways of approaching this, the last point here is that these all work. So it's perfectly functional for you to say, okay, this is I'm a female and my significant other is a female, and so I'm going to choose to use the snake card. And I'm just going to do that all of the time. Anything that you do consistently is going to be functional and it's going to work for you. The problem will be, obviously, that you'll never have the snake, which is a card, an interesting card, an important card, I think, to show up in readings in other ways. That's always going to be functioning that way, and you're kind of removing that from play. So I will say that while I think, can you do it? Yes, you can do whatever you want. They're your tools. But I do think that can remove part of the deck. There's 36 cards. Each card is important. And so when you remove that from play all of the time, I think it does change the dynamic of the deck. So I'm not a huge fan of it, but just understanding that we are all, these are tools for each of us, and we have to figure out what resonates and works with ourselves, and then apply that in a consistent way. And that consistency is more important than anything else. So when choosing, and you can see my mind, you'll see the word consistently, and if you take my classes, you'll see the word consistently pop up all of the time, because that is the important thing. It's important to have a work card so that every time you go to the table, you know, and a card shows up, you're looking in the same spot for it. To have that work card hop around causes muddy readings, because you're just kind of, oh, well, this has shown up in reading, maybe this is about work, but it's something entirely different, because you've just got too many work cards or something along that nature. So anything that you do, as long as you do it consistently, helps to get clearer readings and less confusing and muddy readings. So, these are just some basic ones. So you have the man and the woman card, which also you can think of, and this is another way to approach the man and the woman card, is think masculine, feminine, yang and yin energy. And so the man card could always represent the querent. And again, we're looking at traditional duality of masculine yang energy, that is you having an active role in your own life. And the woman can represent the yin and the receptive energy of who you are open to being significant to you. And so that's another way that you could go around the whole gender thing, that the man is the number 28 card is always the querent, and the 29th card is always the significant, regardless of gender. So that's another way that you can, which is basically what I did in my deck, but I took the gender out entirely. But you can do that with a regular traditional deck as well. Prentice says, as a gay guy, I always choose to sign a lady as my, yeah. It doesn't matter. It's a symbol, right? As long as in your head, the lady represents somebody that you're receptive to being in your life, that's all that matters. And I do think as human beings, logical human beings, we're able to make that leap, or we probably wouldn't be people who are reading Lenormand, right? That's my opinion. Um, so now I did want to bring up this point, and I think this will show a little bit more as we actually get down to doing the readings. One of the things that I sometimes do is really broaden out the significator card because I don't want to lose something to be able to show up. So the example that I have here is that if a woman is looking to change jobs and start a new business, if we use the anchor or the moon card, we can remove those from showing up in the actual reading. And so I might still choose to use the woman as a significant because she's got questions about work and business. And so I still will use the woman card as a significator in a 9-card reading so that that moon or that anchor could actually have an opportunity to show up and give her an idea of what direction she needs to go in, whether it's her job, current job, or building a business. So there are times in which I try to just stay general, still keeping the question on. So if I pull the woman card and say, okay, we're focusing on, what direction, Michelle just walked in, so I'll say Michelle. That Michelle is, we're going to focus on what direction Michelle needs to be going with her career. She has questions about whether or not she should continue in the job that she's in or start to build her own business, the job being an anchor if it shows up, the moon being the moon if it shows up. And so then I'll lay out my 9 card, and then there's an opportunity for the moon card to show up in a significant way that says, okay, this is the direction you might start looking in. Whereas if I stuck the moon in the middle, I've lost an opportunity for that to show up, if that makes sense. I think that makes probably make a little bit more sense as we actually do the readings. But sometimes that's what's in my head is I'll say, okay, yeah, I could use this anchor as the significator card, but there's something about the question that makes me want that to come up by itself. I just back up to the base significator cards, or I can go maybe to the path. Somebody is trying to figure out the right path for work and isn't sure about going towards a job, a 9-to-5 job, or their side business. So then I might choose the decision card. She's got a choice to make. And that leaves, again, the anchor and the work card to show up. So there are times in which I do that. But again, it's all about that process of, and it sounds like this is a long process, but it really isn't. As you get comfortable with the significators, you're getting your deck out, you're thinking about your question, you're shuffling the cards, and you're like, okay, this is the question. This person has a question about work. They're not sure whether or not they should be, staying with a corporate 9-to-5 job or whether they should be building a business. And I will verbalize this to the person I'm reading for. So let's go ahead and use the question card as a significator, because you're the path card, because you're trying to see which direction to go in, and we'll really be paying attention for the anchor card to show up as your regular job, and whether or not the moon card shows up in terms of your building a business, and then you lay the cards down. And so you've established in your head and or in the head of the person that you're reading for, if you're not doing it for yourself, you've established those parameters, and then you lay the cards down and you see what happens. So it's not complicated or time consuming once you're comfortable to take the time to really solidify in your own head and or in the head of person you're reading for where your focus is going to be going to. And I think it's an important step for both reading for self and for reading for others. I think we already talked about these. Okay, so these are some basic ones. The man and the woman card as significators. Work in the German format is anchor. In the French format, I believe, is fox. I've also seen, I believe, sometimes the fish card being used as a work card. My one issue with the fish card being used is that it takes sometimes, a lot of times actually, if somebody does a grand tableau for work, the whole thing is surrounding about their career. Looking at the anchor or the fox, if the fox is your card, looking at that card for work, and then finances being something separate, because finances have a lot of things surrounding it, right? That in a work question, we may want to look, the job itself might look like it's really fantastic, but when we go to look at the finances, it's like, okay, it's a really great job, but financially this may not be the best job. So I'm not a big proponent of using the fish as a work card, and you don't hear that very often, so I don't think it's super common. But mostly I've heard mostly of the anchor and the fox card. Obviously, for me, the fox is it's one of my favorite cards. So pulling that out of play is not something that I would want. It's such a card that comes up for me all the time for people, giving them warnings and kind of a heads up of paying attention, that I would no, I don't want to lose that card. Somebody else not, in love with the fox card may be like, okay, that's one I can get rid of. I'm going to use the fox card. The anchor card is really important to me for something else. So it's just about establishing what those things are. School is often the book, as I said. Sometimes university, a higher education, people will use as the tower. Same thing with jobs. You could have anchor as a work card. Some people often will promote the tower as being for, say, a corporate job. But I think that would be more important if, let's say, the tower shows up next to the work card or something of that nature. I wouldn't probably use a tower as the work card. But now, see, as a person reading for herself, Jasmine just said that the tower comes up for her specific company that she works for. So that's experiential knowledge, which you cannot, you can't discount experiential knowledge. I can't discount it or promote it enough. That we can do all this mental work, but in the end, getting those cards on the table time after time, you start to build up, okay, this always comes up in this situation. So it's so important. The path card is often used to go look when you have a big decision to be made. Love card with the heart, committed partnership, as we talked about with the ring. It can also be a commitment at work or a partnership at work, all kinds of partnerships. But just in general, these are just kind of ways people generally use it. And then the cross, we can really look to if depression is involved, if weight, something is really burdening, becoming a burden for that, or is a burden for somebody, you can look around the cross card. That's often ways those are used. So taking the time to go through each of these, and I think in your handout, I really need to reprint all my handouts so that I can see them. But I believe in the handout, you have a spread, an empty spread of the grand tableau, or some form of being able to go through and think about what those cards could represent in a question. And it doesn't mean that every single card I don't use every single card in here as a consistent significator card. There are main ones. I'm going to move this over for a minute so that's not blocking it for people watching back. So there are main ones, because let's be honest, there are, especially as a professional reader, there are specific questions that come up repeatedly, right? So I am generally getting questions about work or career. So for work or career, I'm always looking for the anchor card or the moon card as a secondary, somebody that's building a business on the side, or somebody who's really working in something that is their heart business. I might look to the moon card. But those are the two cards I generally use for work. Then, of course, finances, I'll look to for the fish card in a work or career question, because that's a subset of often what people are asking about with work. People ask about relationships, right? That's a big question that you're going to get as a professional reader. It's some form of a relationship question. And so then I'm depending on the relationship, or if they're looking for love, I'm looking to the heart card. If they're in a relationship, I'm looking to the ring card and the significant other card. So for this is my deck. So I have a significant card. So I'll be in a committed relationship. I will look in the ring card and the significant card. If, as Jasmine was somebody, I might not have been Jasmine. I'm sorry, Jasmine, if I just used you as an example. But if you actually say, you know, there's an actual person that I'm interested in, but there's nothing there, then I still might go to the significant and look around that, and then probably look at the heart card. So in terms of relationships, generally you're looking at heart card, ring card, and significant, depending on the relationship. The other questions that come up a lot as a professional reader have to do with your path, right? It has to do with, I'm feeling stuck. I'm feeling like I just really want to move forward in some way, but I'm stuck. I don't know how to get movement forward. So then those start to shift and change, right? I might look to the stars card because this is our personal destiny. This is a path that our life is going in. If somebody's really focusing on the fact that they are feeling stuck, they are blocked, they don't know which way to go, they're just at a standstill, then I might be looking around the mountain card, because the mountain card is an obstacle, right? There is a blockage that's there, and so they need to figure out a way to navigate over the mountain, under the mountain, around the mountain, you know, find the path through the woods to find their way to the other side. So I might look to the mountain card. But generally, in sort of that personal path kind of question, I'm usually looking to the stars card. If they're stuck, I might look to the mountain card. If they are not really stuck or blocked, but they want to just some insight in how to move into 2019 in a better way, then I might look to the stork card, because the stork card is about moving from where you're at. Doesn't mean it has to be bad, but where you're at to moving to a better position. And wherever you're going, it's better than where you are. And so I might look to the stork card. So I'm trying to think. The book card, then again, school. If school comes up, I'm generally either mostly I'm always looking at the book card. You can, again, some people make a case for the tower card if they're talking about university, but in general, I'm just going to look to the book card. The only time I'd probably use the university is if somebody was still in high school, and so their high school concerns are still there, but they're looking at also college issues, preparing for college. Then I would say, the book could be high school, their current studies, and then the tower would represent going into higher education, right? So that would be the only probably reason I would use the tower over the book card for school. So as you'll see, like most of these, I don't use every single card all the time, very rarely. Those are the key ones that I'll use. Other ones that do come up might be the key card. If somebody is really looking for, success, like I am just trying to bring about more success in my life, that type of question, maybe I'd look to the key card for that. If somebody was saying that I really need to start to tap into my own inner strengths, I really need to start to work with that, then I would go to the bear card for that. So for some of these, when we start to get into some of these more what I would call spiritual questions or personal development type questions, then you start to get in, it's interesting and fun to start think about which of these cards might represent that. If it's just a personal growth question, I don't mean just as in that's not much, but if it's a question in general about personal growth, then I would look around the tree card and look to that. These types of things. If somebody's maybe having a lot of anxiety, then I'm going to look around and how can I deal with this, anxiousness that I'm feeling? That I might look to the bird card with that. So there you can move out from those, but I think as a general rule, as a professional reader, you are generally working with work questions, relationship questions, and some then personal growth or personal development questions seem to be the major. So you kind of return to those significators a lot. But I still think that the exercise of going through each of, take one of your decks and put it in order, and looking at each one and thinking, what could that mean? How could I use that as a significator? Is a great way to start your brain thinking about it. So you just kind of start with the writer and say, okay, well, what situation might come up that I would use that as a significator? Okay, somebody's waiting. I'm really hoping let's say yourself, you're really excited and waiting for a message that's coming. You're thinking, okay, I'm going to be getting a message soon, potentially about getting this job, and I'm really thinking it's going to happen. I wanted to lay some cards down surrounding this message that I'm waiting for. So you might use the writer card for that and then pull the cards that are around it. With the clover card, I want to start to be mindful. I want to start paying attention to the small opportunities and seeing how they could grow into a bigger opportunity. So I might choose the clover card as that little bit of luck and happiness that will come when you're paying attention. Or you might be in a really crappy place and you might be thinking, I just need a little bit of happiness. Like, I just need to see where that little spark of something better is. And so you might pull for the clover card, right? And that might be your significator for that situation. I'm going on a trip. Okay, I might pull out the ship card because that's generally about travel or those kinds of questions. So go take time. I really encourage you, even if somebody who's read Lenormand for a while, take time to go back through each of the cards and think about a question that might have that as a significator card. I think it's a great exercise, whether you're new to Lenormand or you've been reading it for a while, to sort of revisit what these cards could stand for. The snake card does come up sometimes for me as a significator when somebody's like, I'm just in a really complicated situation and I don't know which way, where things stand with it. Then I might use a snake card for that. That one does come up. So I encourage you to take time to do that this week, because I think it will help you to start to see how there's so many questions that any question can be addressed, but you can really start to focus it in when it's not just always pulling for the man and the woman card. And again, there are reasons why you might want to step back into just the man and woman card so that you can let those cards show up organically. This is mostly important, especially when you're doing a grand tableau, because then all the cards are there and you can start looking around like, okay, here's a situation. I'm going to look over here for the complications. I'm going to look over here for why things are blocked. I'm going to look over here for this weight that this person is feeling. I'm going to look over to the sun to see where is this going to start growing again? How, you can just start to bounce your way around the grand tableau. And it's what, in my opinion, is so wonderful about grand tableaus. So, let's see. I get so excited talking about this stuff. It's definitely my jam. Okay. So last week we talked a little bit about combining two cards together, and then combining three cards together, and then pulling this into a 9-card reading. It's all part and parcel, right? If you're comfortable with a 3-card, look at this column here in the middle. If you're comfortable with a 3-card reading, you have 3 rows, right? So you read this 3 cards. You have 3 columns, so you can read this card, these cards here together, right? You can read 3 card diagonals, 3 cards diagonals this way. You can look at present cards, you can look at past cards, you can look above cards, you can look below cards. Like, there's so many ways in which you use a 3-card. Now, the 2 cards I don't use as much. I use them for the corners, but that to me ends up being a little bit more of what would be, last week we would have called the sequential. So, and we're going to talk more about reading the corners, but when you go from here to here to here to here, generally I'm not reading those in pairs. Generally I'm reading that as a sequential. Okay, the sun, the heart, well, these are just repetitive, but I'm looking at the corners and I'm kind of reading them in a more of a message there that's going on. So the 2 cards I think are great to be comfortable with pairing cards together, but in the end I think that Lenormand really functions a lot on the 3 cards, and the ways in which you certainly read a 9-card reading is a lot almost all of it is based off of working with 3 cards together at a time. And so that then translates out to the grand tableau, which you'll see in a minute. If you get comfortable with a 9-card reading, the same things that we do to a 9-card reading, we're going to be doing 9-card readings in the grand tableau, but the way that I process a grand tableau is the same way that I process a 9-card. It's just out. The first 3 cards are over here. I'm looking at the corners. I am looking at the essence row, which isn't so much used in the 9-card. But it is the foundation for reading Lenormand, in my opinion. The 9-card reading is. It's a wonderful reading. And I will say, for those out there who are readers of other systems, a 9-card reading, whether you're reading tarot or Lenormand or oracle, a specific kind of oracle, or cartomancy, for sure. Cartomancy is very much based off of 3-card readings and 9 cards for me. Runes, I cast 9 runes for almost always. When I'm casting runes, I'm casting 9. So the number 9 is a fantastic way to read, whether you're doing whatever system that you're doing. A 9-card tarot reading, a square like this, read very similarly, can make some amazing insights that way. I think I have a video on my YouTube channel about the power of a 9-card reading. So it's a skill that I think can apply and expand to other types of divination as well. Do you understand now how much I like the 9-card? Have I clearly shown how much I enjoy the 9-card in any format? The number 9, my number is the number 3. So 3 times 3 is 9. 3 plus 3 plus 3 is 9. It's a powerful number of growth multiplied. And the number 9 itself stands for dynamic energy. It's a lot of energy that's bouncing around. Now, that can be difficult, and it can be means there's a lot of difficult energy bouncing around, but it is very energetic energy. And so you can certainly see that, I think, in the readings within itself. So this is an example of a grand tableau. And thank you, Chris. I appreciate your kindness about my deck all laid out. So this is a random grand tableau that you might get. And the way that I mean it, this is a series of 9 cards. Now things start to get complicated, right? Because you won't always have the full 9 card. We'll talk about that more when we get to the grand tableau. But the key is that when you're looking at a grand tableau, you're going to a significator card, such as over here is the book card. So somebody has a question about school, right? And so you go to the book card. Here's the book card here. The cards that are touching that card, if it's somewhere in the middle where it can, you're going to get a complete 9 card to work with. Sometimes that may not be the case. I think I show that later, and then we certainly talk about with the grand tableau. Today we're focusing on working with the 9 card, but you will work your way around the card. So here's the heart card. We're going to look just at the cards that are surrounding it. We don't have to look at everything else. There are ways that we can connect other things, but you can lay a grand tableau if you have the space and or you have a mini deck. And you have a little bit more extra time just to lay the whole things out. If you're going to do a 9 card, you can choose to just always lay a grand tableau. Just go to the heart that you're looking at, look at the cards around it, and you're done. You don't have to do anything else with the grand tableau, but just look at one specific thing if you want to have that experience of where is this falling in the grand tableau. Because there's things about where something is that can also give you information. Again, we'll talk about that more with looking at a grand tableau. But the point is that here you are just looking for okay, there's a decision that person has to make. Here's the path card. I'm going to look at the cards surrounding that particular card. I'm going to, here's the querent card. Well, there's only 3 cards, right, that are touching it. I'm going to really look at those 3 cards because those are what's touching that card, and that is what is the most important. And then we start to work out from there as well. But in terms of the significator that we're looking at, the cards touching it become very important. So let's go over here. Okay, so it's hard to not skip, for me not to skip ahead to situations with the grand tableau, because you know I get excited. But let's pull it back into the 9 card. So there are 2 different ways that you can lay out a 9 card. You can shuffle, 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 and we're going to do this. We're going to do examples of each of these, so don't worry. I'm just trying to do this quick, like, okay, let's go through the slides, and then let's put it on the table, because I personally believe that's the best way to be able to process all of this. But you can, as we talked about last week, you can shuffle, 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 and lay out 9 cards just like you do with tarot or any other system that you're doing. You're shuffling it, you're either splitting it or dealing it off the top of the deck, and you're laying your cards out. Perfectly acceptable way, probably traditional way to lay out the 9 cards. So that is a great way to, you have 9 random cards. That's the benefit of doing it that way, is that you have 9 random cards, and you can look to that center card for a key information about the situation, because that center is there in the middle. The way that I read is that again, because for me, the significator cards are so important and proximity is so important, I shuffle, 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 stop talking. Okay, I'm gonna do a 9 cards. You're generally looking at one question, right? So that's pretty easy. You're shuffle, shuffle, shuffling. Okay, this is going to be, well, this particular one, because it's got a querent there. This particular person, you just want a general reading. Shuffle, 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 shuffle. Turn the cards over, find the querent card, take the 4 cards in front and the 4 cards after, and build the 9 card. Now, I still have a significant card, because then I look to the upper left-hand corner, which is where we look for a significant message in a grand tableau. So they mirror each other. So I simply look to that card as being that significant, where I would look to the center card in a random spread. In a pulling for a significator, I look to the upper left-hand corner, because in a grand tableau, when you first lay the cards out, you're always looking at the first 3 cards as being a significant message for the reading. And so that is reflected in this card right here in the 9 card. Sort of an overall energy card. So you still have that, it's just 2 different ways of getting it. So those are the 2 ways, and there is nothing right, better, or worse about either one of them, other than the fact that what resonates with you. And so what is important to me is that I get cards that are closest to that significator card, so that I maintain some of what makes Lenormand Lenormand, because Lenormand is the grand tableau. And so if I'm going to do a smaller reading, as much as I can, I want to maintain what makes Lenormand Lenormand, and that's why I pull the way that I do. And it works for me, and it's something I apply consistently. Try both ways and figure out what really works for you and what really resonates with you, and do that consistently. And it you know, that's all that matters, is that sort of, this really clicks with me, this is how I'm going to do it, and I'm going to apply that consistently and do that. And that's all, that's the key there. So when I'm doing examples, most of the time you're going to see me doing it from the picking the significator. It's just simply how I read. And it also does help prepare you for the grand tableau in terms of looking for that significator card and then processing the cards that are around it. So if you're new to Lenormand, I would say do some both ways to see this week, so that you can see what feels good for you, feels right for you. If you are somebody who, I understand that the proximity base, although the center is a significant, you look to the first top card, as that is important in a 9 card spread, or the 9 cards you look at within both. Yes, again, if you're, even if I was doing it this way, I would still be looking to the upper left. We're going to step through the process, so I'm not going to go try to parse out your question too much yet, because we're going to step through step by step. But if I understand the question correctly, it's important in reading a 9 card, but it's also important whether you're doing just a 9 card or you're doing a 9 card within the grand tableau. I process a 9 card the same way, whether it's by itself or in a grand tableau. And again, we're going to do all this in a way in which we're actually working on it. And I think that that helps often more. I'm going to show you this really quickly just because this is showing how this pattern that we read a grand tableau gets applied to a 9 card. So this is just the grand tableau laid out. When you're first sitting down to do a grand tableau, if you're doing a full reading, at least the way that I will teach you to read, you'll look first to the first 3 cards as a significant theme or overall energy or message from that particular reading. You'll then look at the corners, 1, 2, 3, 4, and read the corners. And then there is an essence line in a 9x4. It's down the middle, and 8x4 plus 4 at the bottom. You still have the corners. We'll look at that more when we do a grand tableau. You still have the corners that you're going to do. You don't do the essence row, and then that essence row is at the bottom. Again, this isn't about the grand tableau. I just wanted to show you how that same process is going to apply to the 9 card. So here's the first step when you lay your cards out, whether this is the randomized and this is the way where we pick a card in the middle, a significator for the middle. So the first thing that we're doing is looking for that overall energy of a card or for the reading. If you have randomized your cards, you're looking to the middle and you're looking to the upper left-hand corner. If you have chosen your significator, you're looking at the upper left-hand card and how that relates to the question or the significator that you have chosen, right? So the first step when you lay out a 9 card is to look, my brain always goes to that upper left-hand card, and it combines it with the question and or the center card to get just an overall feeling about the overall energy of the reading itself. The second step is to look to your corners. You look at the first upper left, go down to the second bottom right, go up to the upper right, and then down to the bottom left. Now, can you do this in different order? I believe this is the traditional order. So you can do anything you want. As much as I'm going to show you the process that I use, anything that you do consistently, just hear the word consistently in your brain, anything that makes sense to you in any order that makes sense to you and that you apply it consistently is going to work. There's not anything that wouldn't work unless you're just randomly making things up, obviously. So if in your head you say, you know what, I really want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, or I really want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever, if there's other combination of ways that you can do it. As long as you're applying that consistently and every time you're doing a reading, you're reading in that order, that's all that matters. So I'm just teaching you the way that I either learned, have read. I couldn't even tell you where exactly that this is how I learned to do it, but this is how I process through a grand tableau and or a 9 card. So again, what you do not want to do is to not be consistent, because, right, the order of the cards can change the message. There are nuances that get shifted in the order that you do things. So if you are not being consistent, let's say this isn't a good example, but let's say one of these cards was the cross card or the clouds card or the coffin card or something that would be more what you would see as being more of a negative base card. If that shows up as the end, you in your head, if you're not doing it consistently, you might say, okay, you know what, I'm going to start here and work my way around, because then the sun card's going to end up as the last one. So yeah, it's really difficult right now, but the sun is coming up and everything's going to be wonderful. Whereas vice versa, there might be a lot of good things happening, but there's something coming to an end that isn't quite there yet, and you're like, I don't want to think about there's something bad's coming up, so I'm gonna read it this way. So, and again, I don't think that your brain is like literally saying to yourself, okay, I'm gonna switch this up because I want this ending. It's subconsciously you're just gonna move to what is more in alignment with what it is that you want. I think that's just human nature. So that if we have a consistent pattern, then that kind of thing is overrode, right? This is a pattern I go in, Okay, we're starting with the sun, we're ending with the coffin card. What's going on? What do I need to be aware of what's coming to an end? Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. I need to start processing this. Or the other way around. Okay, yeah, got the cross card right here. I am definitely feeling burdened, but look, by the time I get to the fourth card, all right, sun's coming up, I can deal with this. You want to get a consistent good message based on what's going on, not based on how you might want things to be. So I think that however you choose to do it, consistency is the key. Kelly's mantra, consistency is the key. So first step, we've looked at the center and or the upper left-hand corner. Second step, we process through the corners, 1, 2, 3, 4, or however you choose to do so. In the third step, we're reading the cross. Now, I will say that this is one of those things that in a grand tableau, sometimes I look at and sometimes I don't. It depends on, for me, whether the question or what I'm looking at needs a more of a, I look at this part as sort of giving us I think it's from Geomancy, because I do read Geomancy a lot, the understanding of a beginning, middle, and sort of the aftermath. So in Geomancy, if you are reading to the directions, you're getting a snapshot as to how things have started, how things can go about in the middle, how things come to an end, and then how what is the result, so the aftermath of that. So I think that's kind of why I kind of look at that as a sort of an overarching energy of what's going on around the situation. So if a question that doesn't apply to it, I may not go there, but this is the order in which I would do it, and this is the order that I read them in. Again, I believe this has changed from the way that I think I was taught a different way, and I can't even tell you what it is at the moment. Maybe it was like 1, 2, 3, 4. It was something else was the way that I was taught, and it just didn't really resonate with me or make sense. And so I read them 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, it doesn't matter as long as you do whatever you're going to do consistently. Truthfully, I should just, have a drinking game. Could be orange juice. Every time you see consistency on one of my slides, take a big drink. But this is the third step that you would take. And this would be similar with the grand tableau as the essence card. So in the grand tableau, looking in the upper left-hand corner, looking in the corners, looking at the essence row. In a 9 card, looking in the upper corner, looking in the corners, looking at the essence row, which would be this cross, would be equal to this cross. Then you can start parsing this out, and this doesn't necessarily have to go in this order, but if you are new to Lenormand or new to this type of reading, having sort of a step-by-step process to work through, I think is helpful. And this can depend on the question itself. If this question's really focused in the past, I'm probably going to skip to the past. If a question is really like, I need to know what's happening, I'm probably going to skip to the future, right? You start to pull out the key things that are helpful to you to answer the particular question that you have. But if you're just parsing out a general reading, then you can go in this order, and it just helps to make sure, are you touching on all the information that you could get out of this amazing 9 card. So you start to read your sets of 3s. So you can read what's going on above the situation. This can be information that you're not fully aware of. This is, think about things in the head, things that you're thinking about the situation, higher messages. If it's more of a spiritual question, these might be a message from your guides or a message from divinity. What's going on above the situation that might give you a better perspective? What's going on below is really important. I find this section here to be really important in a reading, because what's the foundation, right? What is all of this other stuff standing on? What's foundational here? It can be really important to give you information that, you might be feeling like things are really shaky, but you've actually got your feet on pretty solid ground. Or the other way around, you might be feeling like, whoa, 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 real confident. And actually there's some hidden things going on underneath the surface that you're not putting a lot of attention onto. So I actually find that what's below to be really an important thing to look at. Of course, then you have, I'm trying to move this around here, the past, present, and future. So the middle line represents, it's in alignment with your significator card. That's what's most important that you need to pay attention to, what's going on right now. Going to the past is to the left. So in Lenormand in general, including your grand tableau, what's to the left is focusing of a significator card, is focusing on the past, and what's to the right is focusing on what is the future. Now, there are exceptions to this that we'll talk about when we get to reading the grand tableau. There are people who, in a tradition where you follow the gaze of the significator card. So if you're the female card and the female card is looking to the left, that is the future. And if she's looking to the right, that is the future, and what's behind her is the past. I think that that's something that worked well back when people had generally one deck of cards and that's all they used, right? And so in the modern sense, we have so many decks that are available that are often looking in a variety of different directions, or looking straight ahead, or looking kind of down, like demure, looking to the left and down. We have so many different ways in which decks are set up that you have to be prepared to either just follow the gaze, whichever way that might be, or just simply have, and it is traditional in Lenormand to have, things moving this way are being the past, and things moving to the right are the future. That's how I read. I think it's a lot less complicated because, again, we often have multiple decks that don't always have. And the other thing is, yes, that is like Kipper, and Kipper has the same problems. Even more so, Kipper has problems because Kipper is very, very directional. And unfortunately, we have more and more decks that are being created by people who don't read Kipper, or people making Lenormand decks who don't read Lenormand, because now it's become starting to gain popularity in English-speaking countries, which is fantastic, right? It means that I have a lot of Lenormand decks that I absolutely love. But things like directionality get to be really dicey because of having so many different decks, and because many of those decks are not created by people who read those systems. So for the purposes of how I will be teaching you, things to the left, so these cards are going to represent the past, and things to the right are things that are moving towards the future. So you're processing your 3-card chunks in a 9-card by looking at what's going on above, what's going on below, what's going on presently, what's behind the situation, what is happening that is still, and it's not just random, right? Because when we're looking at the past, a lot of people say, what's the point of looking at the past, right? In a reading, in any kind of reading, what's the point of that? The point is that it anchors us. Number one, we can often see the past and say, oh yeah, I am definitely dialed in. That definitely represents the past. But it's also a significant past that is in some way still impacting this current situation that you're reading for. So looking to the past could be a really far past thing, or could be something that just happened that still has an impact on what it is that you're trying to achieve. And that's important to look at, I think. Now, again, you may have just a quick question that you're doing that has nothing to do with anything, and all you want to do is look, how are things going? Where are things headed? You might skip all of this stuff and simply look at these 3 cards to the right and say, okay, that's what I needed to know, and I've got to get going and move about my day. So nothing says that you have to do all these steps, but this is what you can really pull out of a 9 card. So as your 4th step, you're processing your 3 cards. And then there are advanced techniques. These are harder to do. Mirroring, certainly you can actually add houses to the 9 card. And then knighting only really works in certain situations, but we're not going to talk about those until the last class, and we'll talk about them in relation to the 9 card and in relation to a grand tableau. But for right now, these are the main things that we want to focus on. So let me switch this because I think that it's much easier to talk about this and where you can see some questions. So if you have questions that you want to pop in to ask, so we can have some examples while I try to get, oh here, stop sharing. So I try to get us back here. Okay, let me close this down so I don't have extra things open. And I'm gonna take my phone off of hold. There we go. Oh, Miss Anna Teresa, East Coast of Canada. What is the East Coast of Canada? Or are you talking about? It would be Maine. No, in my U.S. brain, I'm thinking Maine. I know she's at Prince. Ooh, I don't even know where that is, and it sounds awesome. I mean, it's obviously on the East Coast, but I'm saying I don't know anything about it. Okay, I'm going to spotlight. Somebody let me know if that has made it big for you, because I know the last time I thought it was taking up the main screen and it wasn't. Anna Green Gables. I played Anne in my high school play. I was so excited to get the part, but then it was like killing myself because she talks a lot and it was a lot of lines to memorize. I still have pictures of just too fun. Anyways, a random side effect. I know it was definitely a good fit, and I do talk a lot, clearly. Since somebody, Lloyd, can you nod at me if you can see my hand? You can. Okay, thank you, Mr. Lloyd. I've got a bunch of decks here just because I like to let people see different decks in play. People just, okay, let's not take up our reading space though. I'm going to try some of the bigger ones, though I'm not sure they'll show up. I'll raise them up as we need to. I do apologize. My desk is old and battered, but that's all right. Okay, so let's go back to Miss Anna Teresa. So we're gonna work our way through some 9 cards. Now, obviously, you can spend as little time or as much time as you want. My desk does have character. I absolutely love this desk, but it is old and worn and still very sturdy. Thank you, IKEA. So this, I'll try to say what the decks are when I swap. This is called the 7th Sphere Lenormand. This is a real modern deck. It's made out of plastic that shuffle. If you like to riffle shuffle, there's no other deck quite as amazing as these plastic decks. The only people I know who make them are this Labyrinthos, and I know they came out with another. They're pricier. They came out with one that matches their golden thread that's in black with sort of the gold lines. It looks like an old Nintendo game kind of like feel to it. But these are the only ones that I know that do these plastic decks, but they shuffle like a dream. No, this is how it comes. It's not trimmed. I also have their Marseille tarot deck. But no, this is it just comes like this. So okay, so we're gonna look for Miss Anna Teresa now. So her question is whether or not they should move. Let's get it focused to the right thing. Regarding move to the East Coast to, let's just say Anna Green Gables country, because what else? Why do you even need a question like this? The answer is sure you should do that. It's a fabulous thing. My whole family, I have a lot of sisters and a lot of nieces, and we're all obsessed with Anna Green Gables, especially the new series is amazing. More about when. So, okay, so let's be serious here and actually ask the question, even though my brain's just going, yes, 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 go, do so with all due haste. There's 2 cards that you could use as a significator card for, or actually 3, let's be honest. You could use the house card, because if you're actually considering moving house, right, then you might use that. You're looking to actually move your household from one place to another. You could use the house card. I tend tend to use that if somebody's still like looking for a house, like they're still in the process of, you know, they want to move, they haven't bought the house yet, they have to go house hunting or apartment hunting or whatever. Then I tend to use the house card. The other one that you can use is the stork card. That's got a little more connotation of, is this move going to be a good move for me? Like, we're making the move. Is this wise? Like, it kind of has an underlying, is this going to put me in a better position? I tend to not like to use the stork card because I want the stork card to be able to show up in the reading saying, yeah, you know, thumbs up, this is going to be a good move for you. You could also use the ship card. I tend to use the ship card more for travel, less than actually moving. So for the most part, if somebody is moving, I'm going to be looking at the house card. But those are the three that I sometimes hear come up, is that perhaps the ship, perhaps the house, perhaps the stork card. So in this case, though, I'm going to look with the house card. So again, it allows for those kinds of things to show up. And especially if somebody is doing a generic that they just want to move, I like to still use the house, because then sometimes the ship comes up to say, yeah, and maybe it's a long distance. Maybe this is a big move, like you're moving continents or that kind of thing. So I tend to, that's one of those situations where you could get more specific, or you could back up to just a generic house for move, because then it allows for some of these cards to show up in a particular reading, if that makes sense. I apologize. I do talk with my hands, and I know that can be very frustrating to people in my videos. The comments, the mean comments we get when we make YouTube videos. So I try to avoid it a little bit, but it is what it is. All right, so let's see here. We're just going to look in general and keeping an idea on timing a little bit for Miss Anna Teresa. Okay, so what I do is I'm just going to do how I read. So can we use the woman? You could use the woman card because Anna Teresa is asking it, but this is her family moving. It's not just her moving, so I probably wouldn't in this particular case. Now, you could make an argument. You could use well, in German tradition, you could use the lily card. So the lily card speaks of family. And so you could see, especially if the question was more, how is this going to affect the family unit? That might be a good card to use in that case. But again, then you're removing this sense of harmony and peacefulness out of the reading. Whereas if you use the house and the lily card shows up, you could say, okay, this is actually going to create some balance and harmony for the family. So that's why I very often do pull back into general, but not so, in this case, not so far back into the woman card, because this affects more than Anna Teresa. It's affecting her entire family, if that makes sense. But technically you could, because she's the one asking the question. It's just one of those things that you kind of get a feel for whether that applies for you or not. So what I do is I've shuffled already. It's already in place where things are going to be. I turn the deck over and I find the house card. Now, I want to remember to tell you one other thing. And this is where, you know, I'm probably going to pass it and you're going to be like, oh, stop, you just passed it. And I'll have to go back and find it. Okay, so this is going to be good because we don't have 4 cards here, and I'm going to show you why. Don't worry about that. So the first thing that I do is I'm going to pull whatever cards are before. If it's not 4, don't worry about it. Pull the cards that are before, and then I'm going to take 1, 2, 3, 4 cards after. I'm just going to take these cards. This is just a tip from me to you. Put these cards to the side without moving them or shuffling them, because these cards are all set for how you would flip them over and do a grand tableau. There are some things you can do with this after you've laid the cards down that is fun to do. So I would say to you, pull your cards and then just set them aside, if you aren't at the front, if you haven't, you know, the cards that you pulled aren't the very first cards, take those first 3 cards and set them aside, because you get a peek into what would have been a significant message from the grand tableau right away. What I love about this scenario is, okay, so let me do this, and we're gonna do this a bunch of times. So even though if you're looking at me like I have no clue what you're doing, we're gonna do this repeatedly. Take your significator card, which is the house here, and take your cards that are 4 cards after and just lay them out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then take the cards that were before and go backwards. 1, 2, 3. Now, most of the time you end up with 4. I would say the majority of the time you end up with all of the cards, but very often it doesn't, and people panic about that. They're like, oh, you know, all the cards aren't there. Don't worry about it, because sometimes that actually is part of the message. If you allow it to be, that can be part of the message that's there. If you're a professional reader, like I am, and somebody has paid for a 9 card, you of course then want to make sure you pull some other cards to give them what the value of what they paid for. But I always, even if I end up like this, where I've just got the 4 cards after because this has shown up as the very first card, I will still work with that first, give them the message that I get out of that, and then I'll pull some extra cards because again, they paid for a 9 card reading. But if you're reading for yourself, don't worry if they're missing, because that has a message as well. But some people, though, let's be honest, some people, that's going to drive you crazy. We all have some part of our brain that's crazy brain, as I have many pieces. And surprisingly, this should bother my brain. Reversals bother my brain. This doesn't bother my brain because there is a message in this empty space. But if this bothers you, then this type of reading may not be for you, and you might just want to lay your 9 cards out. And there's nothing wrong with just laying 9 cards out. I'll do that on the next question. But this is how I read, so that's why I'm starting here. So let's step our way through how the steps that we just talked about in slide format. So I've picked this house as a significator card. This card here is the card that would have said to the reading a sort of overall message about the question. And her question was leaning specifically towards timing. They've already decided that they're going to move, but the timing of when that's going to happen. The fact that this isn't here says to me that that timing is not locked into place. Like there are still factors at play, because again, also this comes back to how do you believe about what do you believe about the future? It's important. It doesn't matter if you believe in a fixed future where fate is involved. That is nothing wrong with that. You need to know that so that you can read your cards correctly. I don't believe in a fixed future. I believe that our future is in flux. There are things that are more locked into place and things that are less locked into place. There are things that have a lot more variables still, and things that are so close that they are very much locked in. This is, for me, this says that's not the case. There's a lot of variables that are still in play that make timing a difficult thing. I think timing is always difficult, but in particular, this is a timing issue for this move. There's still too many variables at play to really get a feel for that. Now, we're still going to be able to look at some degree of that, but because this space is empty, that's not a non-message. That itself becomes a message. And so if you allow for those empty places to say something, I think that you'll find it's not as troubling to come to a place where some cards are missing. So that's the first thing I would say, because that's the first place we're going to look at is in the upper left-hand corner. The next thing we do is we look at the corners. Now, we're missing a corner. Don't worry about it. Just go to the next corner over here, which is the tree card. This is a fabulous card to show up because this is a card about growth. This is a card, this is indicating to me that this move is going to provide some growth for her family. There are ways in which things are going to become strong. The roots are going to go deep. Growth is going to occur when they move. This might indicate to me that this is a move that they go and they stay and they settle. And this is sort of becomes the place where they really dig their roots in. We have the bear card, which is also that sort of internal strength. There's a lot of strength, roots being settled. And then we've got the tower card, which is that gaining perspective. We're really starting to see the world from a place that of above, up and above, and seeing perspective. So in a general sense, and these types of things, especially in a grand tableau, this corner card and these four corners are general messages. I wouldn't generally take these things as being really specific. I tend to look at these as this overall feelings of what's going on. And when you just look at that, you get a sense that, okay, things aren't locked into timing yet, but this looks like in the long run, this is really going to be able to be a place where they set their roots. And in general, it has a good feel to where things are going. In a more specific sense, in terms of timing, again, there's still maybe perhaps some growth that needs to occur. There is just kind of trust their inner instincts, trust their inner strength for when it's right. And they may have to take a step back from the situation and gain some perspective so they can really start to decide when is the appropriate time to be moving, because it's not locked in. There may be like, okay, yeah, you really want to get there. This is where you want to go. It's going to be a good place when you get there, but you might just have to step back a little bit and kind of see a bigger picture so that you can decide on timing more appropriately. Remember that reading Lenormand, every card doesn't have to just have one message, that there are multiple messages that come from the same cards, and go with that. Whatever is coming, it's almost, stream of consciousness. Somebody sent me, I don't know if they did it on the group. I'm so bad. I need to start writing it down if I'm going to refer to it. But there was somebody that was processing their homework, and it was really stream of consciousness. They got to the same message that I wrote very succinctly, because I don't read people's, I first do my own, and then I'll read what you've said in your homework. They got to the same place, but it was very stream of consciousness. And it's a great way to kind of talk your way through a reading, because sometimes things just come out that way. And you don't have to have some firm, okay, well, where did that come from? Like, well, that doesn't make, don't worry about it. If something pops into your head in a reading, there's a reason for it, and listen to those don't shut those things off. Like that's the intuition really, and the messages that are coming out. These are just symbols. The point of these symbols is to trigger a message for yourself, and so roll with those messages. But the key is that each card, let me breathe for a minute because I'm getting so excited here. The key is, so let's take this card right here. When you're doing the first card reading, this first step, we're looking here, and it's a significant overarching energy of the reading. But when we look to the past, we're not stuck with how we read that for the overarching message. Now it's part of this past message, and it's being read in a different way. Now it's part of what's going on above. Now it's part of the corner cards. Just because and I see myself frozen, so if I'm frozen, let me know. I think I unfroze. Okay, yep, I see that. So the point is that if I say, okay, this first place here, I'm saying, okay, well, this means that timing isn't locked into place, blah, 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 blah. I make what this means as the upper corner. You're not locked into that when you start to combine it with other cards. The cards are morphing and shifting depending on what we're connecting those cards to, and that's part of the beauty of reading with Lenormand. And I would argue with reading any card set if you're reading multiple cards that are touching each other. So don't feel locked into that. Okay, sorry, Miss Anna Teresa, I'm just rambling through your message. So we talked about the corner cards. Two things that come out for me that is that this is going to be a really great move for them. But in terms of timing, again, trust their instincts, take a step back, make sure that you're looking at the bigger picture and making that solid understanding of when is the best time to move, not just based on that you want to get there and start growing those roots. So that would be the corner card that I would get out of that. So then the next step is reading the cross card. So again, it's interesting though that the clouds are here at the first, so I read the cross, 1, 2, 3, 4. So right now it's not very clear when they're going to move, when the timing of this is going to be. Is right here. This deck has a female card and a male card. It's got the anima and the animus card, which again, I like what they've done with it because it broadens up everybody has anima and animus in them. So males have feminine energy and masculine energy in them. Females have masculine and feminine energy in them. And so it's tapping into that specific type of energy versus a gender or a gender label that we might have. So I do like what they did here. But this is the woman card. Now, there's a couple ways that you can read this. We can look at this as being focused on Anna Teresa as a female and as a person who's asked the question. I would still say that in this reading, the question has nothing to do directly with Anna Teresa, or it's not about a person, it's about a family that's moving. So I would still keep this as being more open in general than being specifically about Anna Teresa. So for me, that would indicate being open and receptive, that right now it's not clear when they should move, but that they just need to be open and receptive to things happening in their own timing, because then what happens is the bouquet. This is when great things come, big happiness, big luck, wonderful things are happening, as long as you just be open to the when of things. That right now, that shouldn't be the focus. It's going to happen in its own timing. And when it does, it's really fantastic. But we then have the fox card here at the very bottom. The fox card is a heads up card that says, pay attention, right? Don't just be merrily going about your way of everything's going to work out great. I'm going to be open to the energy of when I'm going to move. Like, that sounds really great. And the energy of that is definitely there. But the fox card says you need to be paying attention. You need to keep your head on a swivel so that you can find that right time, so that you can be really smart about when you actually do make this move. The fox card, when you're talking about things in which there are people that you could ask for advice, it indicates get some advice. So that means if it's talking about a divorce, then I would say go talk to your lawyer. You need to be talking to a lawyer, which you should be doing anyways. But in general, it says go talk to somebody who can read the fine print. If you're buying houses, it says you need to talk to an agent and have them make sure they look over this contract. If you're having a career question, talk to somebody who knows the career that you're trying to get into to give you some better advice. And so this would be an indication that in terms of timing especially, but the question isn't all timing, but in terms of timing, they really want to consult with, I think she said, I missed it, but I think they're waiting for retirement. So this might be, okay, it's time to talk to HR and figure out how all that kind of stuff works. Make sure that you're dotting all you're not like if you leave early, does he lose out on a bunch of benefits that you want to make sure that you're checking with, you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's. If you're actually in the process of looking for houses, the fox card says, read your fine print, make sure your ducks are in a row. If you're working out through financing for getting a house, make sure you're consulting bank consultants, that type of thing. So the fox card is really important. That's one of the reasons I love it so much, is because it really does show up when it's, and especially in this kind of reading, it's saying in general, let things happen as they happen. Don't be in a rush in terms of timing. Make sure you're doing things with a bigger picture in mind. But then the fox card shows up and says, be smart about this. It's kind of putting an exclamation point that says, be smart about this. And if there's somebody that you need to get advice from about this, do that. Do that legwork. So that's the so I'm throwing myself off. Before we look to the left, upper left, right? We look to the corners, we look to the cross. And so now we're going to look at our sets of 3. You can look at what's going on above the situation. Again, here I would say be open and trusting your own strengths in this situation. Yes, get advice, but in the end, you trust yourself, right? So we can put these 2 cards together and say, oh, okay, this is something. This could also speak to Anna Teresa. Again, they can mean multiple things, saying, you know what, doing all of this stuff and managing the moving is something that might be play to her strengths, that she might be very organized. She can do all the work that has to do. She's going to be maybe the one that has to do the legwork in terms of figuring out, where they're going to move and figuring out packing. And, that could be her strength, is to manage this whole situation. When we're in relationships, we don't all have the same strength. strengths, and this might end up being something that is her strength, and she's going to have to take on those sort of extra things because this plays to her strengths. You can look at what's going on below the situation, which again, always look here, folks. It's like gives us a lot of information that we really want to pay attention to because it might not be in our so strongly in our radar. So we've again got the Tower card showing up saying get some, step back and get some perspective, because there is some ways in which they could get tripped up, and they want to make sure they're checking things out thoroughly, making sure they're checking about retirement, making sure they're checking about the location they're moving in, talking with agents, talking with bank people, that type of stuff. There's stuff that details are going to matter, and so getting a step back and being able to see that is going to help them in the long run to get to that place of growth and being able to put down their roots and things of that nature. So we look at what's going on above, we look at what's going on below. We can look down the middle for, like, right now, it's more of that receptive energy. If we're going to kind of go with that idea of a female showing up in a card in which a specific female isn't relevant to the question, then I think just sticking with them energetically is the way to deal with the male and female. And right now, it's not the masculine energy of forward pushing, it's time to move tomorrow. It's like, okay, be open and receptive, but also be aware, be paying attention. Just, start to keep your head on a swivel with the whole situation. That's where her energy presently needs to be. Looking into the past, we can see that there, again, is that uncertainty and that need for having gained a perspective that might have led to them deciding to move. Obviously now they've decided to move, it's timing, but there was probably time in the past where things were quite uncertain and wasn't sure which direction they needed to go in. And some of that uncertainty may start to affect in some ways, okay, did we make the right decision? Is this really the way that we want to do it? So this Tower card has shown up in the corners, which is important. It's shown up in the underlying message here, which is important because it's what's going on foundationally. And it's showing up in the past as well as what's affecting this now. So I would kind of put an emphasis on the Tower card then that says they really do need to see that bigger picture so they can get their timing in place correctly. So then we look to the Future card and we can see things look like this is a great idea. We see the strength of the bear. We see really this being a place that allows them to really bloom into who they're supposed to be, and really it might be great for their kids to find their own inner spaces, this type of thing. Great happiness and luck showing up with the bouquet. We have the roots of the tree growing in the spot. So in a general sense, looking at the Future card, we're like, okay, right now it's not immediate, that's going to happen immediately, but this is a good idea. This is moving in a good direction. So I know that was a lot. And it sounds like, okay, that's going to take forever to do every time I want to do a 9 card, but that's me trying to talk through, right, every these different aspects. You can also do really quick questions and access those things really quickly as well. So hopefully that helps, Miss Anna Teresa. Let me pull that up. Let's grab another deck, and let's see, somebody had, blah, 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 blah. Going back. Okay. Move to the East Coast. Which we need to keep here. So now this is a good, thank you, Miss Jasmine. This is a good question. Let's grab another deck that we haven't used. Let me put this back. So this is another question, because sometimes we have new readers here. So health questions are really important for you to make a decision on what you do with health questions. If you're reading for yourself, it doesn't matter, right? You can do whatever you want to do because you know what you're responsible for. If you are a professional reader, it's super important to understand what you're going to do with health questions because many places it's illegal to do readings, health readings, to do any kind of diagnosing, especially with health questions. And so there are many countries, and then there are, I think, even states in the United States in which there are specific parameters to fortune telling, which is what it would generally fall under in terms of rules. And so you as a professional reader need to be really careful to know the rules that are in your area. So legal wise, you need to be aware of those things. Ethically wise, you also need to know where you stand at that. Do you do health readings? Are you going to do a reading that has anything to do with somebody's health? You need to know those things before you set out to read professionally for other people. I don't do diagnosing health questions for people, and she's not asking to diagnose. I'm using her question as an opportunity to discuss it because it's just a good thing to do when you're talking about cartomancy. So my particular stance is that I don't do health questions, not because I don't think that cards or especially geomancy is built around doing a lot of health questions. The issue as for me as a professional reader is that if I'm doing a reading for myself about health, or my sister or my daughter, and something shows up, I can get myself to the doctor and I can yell at my sister or my daughter until they go to the doctor. And I can know whether they've gone to the doctor or not. With a client that I don't know and I have no connection with, I don't know if they're the kind of person that are going to take whatever they happen to possibly see in the cards and not go get professional help. I have no way of knowing whether they're the personality type to do so or whether they are the person to take something and run with it and then not seek any professional help. Because I don't know that, I don't do health questions for people who I don't know, who aren't friends and family. And I really don't think much for that. Because again, I think you should go to the doctor. So most professional readers in a modern landscape, because of legalities and ethical questions, don't do questions that are health related. And will just simply say, this is what generally how I address this. If somebody sends me a question, it's health related, I will send back what I just said, that I don't do diagnosing or I don't do health related questions, that you need to seek a professional for that. And that if we want, we can cancel the reading or broaden it out. That talks a little bit more about how do I cope with whatever these health issues are that are going on? How can I best cope with these kinds of issues? And so most of the time, they'll simply rephrase the question. Occasionally, and this generally happens more, I think, in European countries where cartomancy is very prevalent and everybody uses it, and it's not even weird to ask for kind of health questions whatsoever, and it's probably not illegal as well. So every once in a while they'll be like, okay, I'll just go find somebody who reads more traditionally, which is fine. So that tends to be how and the other thing is also with mental health issues, the same sort of thing. If somebody were to bring up, say, having suicidal thoughts and wanting to get a reading surrounding that, or that have been depressed to the point in which they can't leave the house, or depending, something that really triggers a flag that this person's really struggling with some strong issues. Again, that's a place in which you may say, okay, I need to, I don't read specifically for strong mental health issues. You need to get to a counselor. You need to talk to somebody who's professional that can deal with this. And also legal issues where somebody might ask for a reading surrounding how a court case is going to turn out, or how to approach a court case. Again, some countries and some states, it is illegal to give legal advice if you are not a lawyer or a professional in some way. So as a professional reader, you need to know, again, the rules and laws of your area. And then in an ethical way, it may be perfectly legal in your area, but you might simply say, I don't do readings regarding legal matters. Again, you can do readings around how to deal with the fallout from being stuck in, say, a hard battle or a hard legal battle or something like that, but actually reading about how to approach it legally, or the outcome of a legal case can get really dicey, and again can get legal, can become illegal in some areas. And so you might be, I just don't read on legal issues that you need to see a lawyer in order to get those. So again, Jasmine is not asking that. I'm just using it as an opportunity to have you think about those things if you are reading professionally. Obviously, if you're reading for yourself, you can read about anything that you want, or your sister or somebody of that nature, you can do it, read however you want. But if you're taking money in exchange, or things in exchange for a reading, these are these kinds of questions that everybody, before you start reading professionally, you need to know both where you stand from a legal aspect, but you also need to know what you're comfortable reading about, and so that you can be very clear about that. In your standard of practice that you would probably have published on your website or something like that, and B, just so that you can kindly be able to represent that to the person asking the question. Because I don't think in any sense should you ever make somebody feel stupid for asking a question or anything like that. Same thing with, let's say, relationship questions. That's another one that a lot of modern readers don't read for another person, a third party. So that's a very common thing that you'll run into with modern readers. And so, whereas in the past, that would be a big thing that somebody might go to a tarot reader saying, I really have a lot of feelings for X, Y, this person. I want to know what that person thinks about me. That's a very common question. And so understanding about whether or not you're going to do that type of reading is important. Now, I don't do third-party readings because of the way that everybody reads differently. So some people get messages from spirit guides. Some people use cards to get messages from the divine. Some people use them just purely psychological as symbols that they are. For me, I believe that when I do readings, I tap into the collective unconscious. That the reason why we can read for each other is because we're all connected. But if a person hasn't asked me for a reading, this is my worldview, if a person hasn't asked me for a reading, they haven't opened themselves up to that connection, and anything that I do reading for them isn't going to be accurate, in my opinion, because they haven't asked for it. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is somebody hasn't asked me for a reading. I personally have ethical boundaries that that's not something that I feel comfortable reading somebody who hasn't asked for a reading. That gets gray, right? Because I do relationship readings. So if somebody wants to ask a question in general, how is a relationship going? Where are things heading in a relationship? But it stays more focused on their role. It still bleeds a little bit into that other person, right? They are part of that relationship. So we all have to figure out like what are our boundaries and know those very clearly before we start reading for other people, so that if somebody asks me a question, I get this all the time, where somebody will purchase a reading and they'll have a question. I really want to know what XYZ is thinking about me. To be able to go back and not be like, well, that's a stupid question. If you have to ask that question, because you hear that sometimes with people talking about these, like, well, if you have to ask that question, then obviously there's a problem. Or is somebody cheating on me? Well, why? Obviously, if you're thinking that, then something's going on. We have to be open and compassionate that this person is paying money and putting themselves out there, asking this question, because for whatever reason, this is really heavy for them. This is important for them. And so to be able to approach that with compassion, say, I fully understand why, this is a question that you would like to have. Unfortunately, this is why I can't do it because of the way that I see readings working, and that I don't think it would be accurate for you. And I don't think it is a good idea for me to read for some, whatever. You want to be able to iterate how you feel in a compassionate way that honors that person's question, but simply indicates that that's not something that you read for. So I know that was a side trail too, but it's important, I think, in any divination style class, that you take the time for yourself, and for eventually down the road, you may want to read for other people, even if it's just your friend. What if it's your friend coming to you and saying, I really want to know what XYZ is thinking about me, or what he's up to. I think he's up to something. You need to know how you're going to approach that. So you need to know how you see the future and how that affects how you read. You need to understand, am I going to read for health questions? Am I going to read on a person that hasn't asked for a reading? Am I going to read legal issues? A big one is also, which goes to me with health questions, but a lot of people, you know, if somebody comes and asks, am I pregnant or am I going to get pregnant? Comes from a place of longing that has counselor aspects, that has health aspects, that has a lot of different things that are wrapped up in that simple question. How are you going to address that? And how are you going to do so in a way that is compassionate? So knowing what your boundaries are for reading, I think is part of anybody who picks up a pack of cards for somebody else, even if it's just your friend or your neighbor down the road, is important to take the time to do so. So I think it's worth going on a bit of a rabbit trail. Sorry about that. But back to Jasmine's question here. So this is how if let's say Jasmine had sent me this question, and I know Jasmine, she's taken a few of my classes, how I would address this if she was somebody coming to me as a client, I would say the same thing. I would say I don't read for health questions. That is something that I leave to the doctors. And so how you should keep your thyroid levels balanced is something your doctor should tell you, whether that's medication, whether that's diet, whether that's exercise. That's not a question that I would ask. If you want to rephrase the question to being, how can I, function best in my life dealing with this thyroid issue, that's a way that could be rephrased in a way that you could read for. So I don't just automatically change somebody's question. That's, again, something that comes up a lot in videos about reading and those types of things. Some people simply change the question and do the reading. I don't think that's the best thing to do personally. I think that having a conversation with that person is the best thing to do. Give them the opportunity to say, okay, well, I'll just go talk to my doctor or talk to somebody else. And then sometimes they just simply rephrase it themselves. So that's how I handle it, is by just giving the person the information of how I do or don't do readings, and then allowing that dialogue to take place, whether or not you're going to go forward or not. So let me go back down here for a second. I'm thinking in the way, how can I live to make? So let's do this generally though, because I do want to do this. Again, I do know Jasmine a little bit more. So what I would do in this situation is have that conversation with the person. I'm not going to do anything diagnosis. I'm not a doctor. I'm not capable of diagnosing. Any kind of medical question should be related to a medical professional. Again, this is important for yourself. If you're not not a professional reader, but if you're a professional reader, it's important legally as well. But what we're going to do here, so anything relating to our sense of well-being and health has to do with the tree card in Lenormand. Generally, again, you can pick something else. Sorry, this is the 1889 Lenormand. It used to be called the Game of Hope. It's one of my favorite decks. Certainly the deck in both formats that I had it in, because it used to be something different. It's certainly the deck I've probably done, besides my own deck, the most readings with. So what I'm going to do is pull for the health card, which would be the house card, and we're going to keep it general for Miss Jasmine. But thank you, Jasmine. I actually really appreciate it, because it is an important topic to have. So, okay, this is a good example. People often ask in Lenormand, what do you do when a card drops out? Jumpers are called jumpers, and a lot of people call them jumpers. I don't pay attention too much to jumpers in Lenormand. I look at them and I put them, if I'm doing a reading for somebody, I'll say, okay, there's a bird card. We can see there's probably a little bit of anxiety around the birds card popping out like that. There's probably some anxiety a little bit about making sure that this works out. But here's the key. I think it depends on you also. I'm generally, as a professional reader, I'm generally doing kind of multiple readings in a row, and sometimes readings that have both tarot cards and Lenormand, because I mix decks a lot. And so going from large cards to small cards to medium-sized cards, you can start to flub your mixing, right? Or your shuffling. And so you can generally tell, in my opinion, the more that you do it, you can tell when you just hand flubbed your shuffle, or when it feels like a jumper. So in both tarot and Lenormand, when a card jumps, as they say, I'll literally just say, I could just feel that I just went from a really large tarot deck to this card deck, and it's a flub. I just keep shuffling. You know, that felt like a jumper. I'm going to pay attention to it. I always put them back in the deck because I want a chance for that to show up again, which does happen. And it's really cool when, you know, you've had a jumper that felt significant, you put it back in, and then it shows up in the reading itself, and you really have that giant exclamation point on that card because of that. So I always put it back in, and then what I'll usually do, and I'll usually say this as I'm doing the reading, I'm going to go ahead and put it, in fact, I think I just did that last night, where I think the Queen of Swords had popped out in a reading, put it back in, and then I said, if it doesn't show up in the reading itself, I'm going to lay it out before I take the picture. That way we can address it because it felt significant. And that's what I'll do, is I'll go ahead and do the reading. If she shows up, great. It's another exclamation point. If it doesn't, I bring it back out and lay it on the table just because it seems significant to the reader. Or to the person I'm reading for. So that tends to be, that question comes up a lot, is it pops out, I'll just note it, stick it back in the deck, and then see what happens. The health is the tree. I must have said something wrong. Generally in Lenormand, the health card relates to the tree card. I've not ever heard of the health card as the house. I might have said house. I could have said something incorrectly. The health card is generally always the tree. Now, again, there are different systems, or there's, I don't think that's different in the French. I don't know I think there's an Austrian or Swiss way. I don't know what the differences are. I've always heard it as the health card. Where's the house card? Sorry. Oh my, that's what I did. I bet I said the house card. House health. It is the tree card. Oh my gosh. No. This is when you talk too much and you have way too many things running around your head. The tree card is the health card traditionally. I've not really heard of any other specifics. You could, I suppose, if you, I think I've seen in some books where if you're looking for, say, a heart condition, this is, again, if you're starting to actually read health conditions, where you might use the heart for issues regarding circulation and the heart, where you might use specific cards to relate, like in geomancy, there are specific houses that relate to specific organs, so that if you're trying to diagnose, which is what they did do, you would be able to do so. So I think I have read in certain books where they're like, okay, well, this relates to heart health, or you might go over here to do that. But I don't, in Lenormand, I've not seen that as much. So I think that mostly it is just the tree card. But you could pick anything you wanted. I mean, if you had a specific health issue that you were trying to read for yourself, what is the card that makes the most sense to you in regard, because it might be how that makes you feel. So that somebody who has a thyroid problem might feel really weighed down, might feel really tired, might feel really foggy. So you might choose either the cross card for that sense of weightedness, or if you have some sort of health problem that makes you really foggy and unclear about something, you could use the cloud card. So certainly if you're reading for yourself, you could, how is this particular health thing affecting you? And you might read for that. But as a general rule, it's the tree. And so I don't, when I'm talking about the tree, I don't usually say it's the health card. For me, it's the card of well-being. What's going on in your overall sense of well-being? Okay, let's see. So again, I'm going to shuffle, and pull for the tree card. I know I said I would do one without a significant, or just lay them out, but it's so hard for me. I'll do the next one that way, I promise. Okay, so here is the tree card. I take 1, 2, 3, 4, and it always feels a little bit awkward at first, but after you start doing this for a while, it's really quick to do. It's not too much of a problem. So you lay your card out, you take 1, 2, 3, 4, lay out your 4 cards. Then you take your 1, 2, 3, 4, and you lay them out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I want to just take a moment to show you. This didn't interfere with the first 3 cards. So what I'll usually do if that's the case is I will take those 3 cards, because these would have been the first 3 cards in the grand tableau. And so these give sort of an overall message there that this isn't required. I mean, obviously nothing's required, but it's something I like to peek at. If the first 3 cards haven't been touched by the reading itself, it's another way just to get an overall message regarding what's going on. And so it's fun to be able to do that. And so I will usually just lay them out and just get a general, I don't go into too much detail about it. It's really more of a general reading. And so this is interesting though, because we do have the sense of vitality. If you think about in terms of well-being, passion and vitality and that kind of energy that comes from the heart card is complicated. So it's being complicated by these health issues, that sense of vitality and sense of, really being engaged in life is being complicated by these health issues that sort of eat away at with the mice card and maybe erode that sense of vitality and energy and passion that she might normally have for life. So that just, I don't spend a lot of time with it, but it's like, okay, it's kind of like a nice little extra there that you can do, which is fun to, just another little add-on. So then I'm going to do this quicker and show you don't have to spend a ton of time to get your message and hit these points. We're just going to walk through the steps real quick. We can see that as an overall energy, this issue is an obstacle for her. As we saw with this is something that does cause an obstacle to what she is trying to accomplish in her life. And so learning to navigate and work with that situation is important so that it doesn't, so that she can reduce the amount that it is going to be an obstacle to what she is trying to accomplish. We can also see that it could be an obstacle actually in her work, perhaps having the energy and all that type of thing that can go with a thyroid issue, that might affect the way that she is being able to navigate her job. However, we do see the stars card. This is part of her path. Often health issues, unless it's something that is obviously something, quick that you can take care of. If it's a sort of an ongoing problem, the stars card does indicate this is part of the way that her body is functioning, and she's got to learn to be able to navigate that. And what's interesting though is that there is even though it's a painful situation with the scythe card, there is some things that she can harvest from it. This is hard, right? Because you say, okay, Lenormand, don't tell me that, yeah, this is a rough thing, but there's a silver lining. Lenormand's great at that. There is a silver lining. Sometimes when we have chronic situations, it causes us to be more mindful of our health. It causes us to pay more attention to our eating habits and getting enough sleep and all these kinds of things that can actually be a difficult situation that is going to give her something. It doesn't mean that it negates that it's difficult, but that it might give her something. Again, for me, in terms of health, this would be a greater focus on making sure of her sense of well-being and taking care of herself. So that would be your corner cards. When you move around, again, I'm not using the man in this situation. This question doesn't have anything to do with the man. I mean, it could, technically, if you're reading for yourself, it might be like, get thee to a doctor, kind of, maybe if your doctor's a man, that you could use that there. But in these types of questions where we're not looking for a specific other person, when I'm not reading for myself, I'm looking at is being an active proponent in your own life, that masculine yang energy. So this is saying in order for you to feel safe and secure and stable in your own self and being with the house, she needs to be active. She needs to be out doing what she needs to be doing, taking her medication, doing the other things like getting good sleep and eating well and exercising well, doing the things that need to be done. She needs to be actively out and taking care of the situation, making sure that her life is balanced out, right? That she has that sense of balance in her life, that everything isn't surrounding that, but at the same time, keeping things in balance are going to help with that sense of weight. Being proactive and keeping things in balance in her life is going to help her to deal with the weight of having to manage this particular situation with her health. So there's our upper corner. Our corner cards go around the cross. And then in this situation, this is interesting. This pops out to me because we do see a painful situation where before I could read as harvesting something good out of it, we can see that this is a difficult situation that can also harvest weight, right? That it is hard. And dealing with something chronically is difficult. It is a hard weight to bear, and it is a heavy weight. And it can also, regarding this particular thing, can cause that sense of tiredness and weightedness and all that kind of stuff there. And that needs to probably brought in to be stabilized with the anchor card here. So the underlying issue is in making sure that she stabilizes things as much as possible to keep the negative fallout from this as minimized as is possible. So you could read that there. Up above here, if you're reading up above, we have that sense this is an obstacle that she is going to have to deal with head on. This is part of her path. It's part of her journey in life, and she's going to have to be proactive about it in order to, again, be at the best that she can do in her sense of well-being. So we look to what's going on above, what's going on below. We look to the past. We've seen in the past for her that this may have been an obstacle that has affected her sense of being secure and safe and well in herself. The house card is about security. It's about how you feel in your own private space, in your own body, in terms of a health type question or well-being. How are you feeling within your own body? And in the past, there's been a challenge, an obstacle to feeling good in her own sense of self that has been difficult and has harvested things. Both, as we've seen, could be both good things in terms of being focused on her health and bad things as in a sense of the side effects to all of this. And then moving into the future, we again have the sense that this is part of her journey. And so she really needs to focus on balance and stability surrounding dealing with the situation so that she can move forward the best that she can with this being part of her path. And there you go. So you can pop your way through fairly quickly, even if you're hitting on all of these things. But remember, if you just have a quick question about the day or something quick, you can lay all this out and just look over here and say, okay, where are things headed today? That's all I need to know. I don't got time for all this. It doesn't take you long to lay it out and just peek at what you want to peek at as well. But getting comfortable with hitting all of those range of, you get if you can kind of equate this is how I think in my head. You can kind of equate 3 cards in Lenormand as 1 card in tarot. They kind of are a good way to equate them in terms of a 9-card reading is, if you just read it quickly, is like 3 tarot cards. You can kind of just look at that body, soul, and spirit, how you would do a 3-card tarot reading. You would, if you're trying to translate a 3-card tarot reading into Lenormand, use 3 Lenormand cards, a set of 3 to equate to that 1 tarot card. But when you're reading a 9-card Lenormand, you're really looking at, let's say we even use the corners, you're looking at 1 overall energy, you're looking at 2 cards here with the corners, you're looking at 3 with the cross card, you're looking at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can really start to dig a lot of cards. You're starting to get into an 8-9 card reading where you can dig a lot of information out of a small 9-card Lenormand, which is really fantastic. So, okay, so let's keep moving. Hopefully that helps Miss Jasmine. And again, thank you for giving us the rabbit trail, because I always like to touch on that. Of knowing your boundaries. Make sure you know your boundaries for yourself and for others as you're going to read forward. Okay, so let me scroll back up. And if you have any specific questions, please throw them in there in terms of what I'm doing. I just think it helps to see them in practice. Like, how are you doing this? Great on a piece of paper, but how does this look like when you're actually doing a reading? Let's see, let's go back up here. Question going to move to our east. Okay, there's that. There's thyroid letter. Okay, here's Mr. Lloyd. So Mr. Lloyd's saying, I've been considering opening an Etsy shop. What information does the universe need me to know before in this process of doing that? Okay, so on this one, let's see, we've done these two. I wonder, let's try a bigger deck. I want to see if one of these will fit. I can move the cards up. Let's do the Earl of Norman because I love this. This is the only space in which I can use the larger decks. The Gilded Reverie is a large deck. I know some people have that one. I have that one as well. I don't use it as much, again, because they're larger deck. Oh, this is all whopper jawed. Because obviously in a grand tableau, these would make giant grand tableaus. So I am not a proponent of people making decks that are large, but I do have a couple that I like, and not using them for 9 cards is a great way to be able to get it used for them. So this is the Lenormand, or the Primal Lenormand, or as you speak German, the Das Spiel der Hoffnung. This is the oldest Lenormand deck that we know of, and it references one version before this, but as far as we know, this is the oldest. It's a reproduction, I should say, of the oldest Lenormand deck. So his question is about opening an Etsy shop. So for me, I consider that to be sort of a side business, or it's a business that he might want to grow. And so instead of the anchor card, which references more work, a job that we have, that type of thing, this is a personal preference. There's no reason for this. I use the moon card because sometimes the moon card, there is one of the traditions, maybe French, that the moon card is an alternate work card. So there is a history for it, or a reason for it, but it's that idea, for me, I think it connects a little bit to that idea of moving upward, that is it connected with the Kipper high honor card. So he's trying to grow something, and hopefully, I'm sure, you don't start a shop or do anything like that if you just want to sit there and not do anything. You're trying to grow something. So I tend to use the moon card for that. Now, let me say the downside of that is that you don't have an opportunity for the moon card to show up, which is where energies are growing and lifting, which you might want to see. So because he doesn't have, it's not a question work versus this, it's just that. What you can choose to do is step back and choose just the anchor card, even though it's not exactly what you're looking for, because it allows for the moon card to show up. But in this case, I'm just going to lay the cards flat, so it doesn't matter. I'm going to lay them out like a lot of people do, just because I promise. So these cards can show up anyways. But if I were to choose a card for this, it would either be the moon, because that's what it would represent for me, or I would step back to the anchor because he's not comparing this to a current job. And that way the moon would have a chance to show up, if that makes sense. But this time we're just going to lay it out flat. Which, let me clarify, is not my preferred way of doing things. If I haven't made that abundantly clear. So he's thinking of starting an Etsy shop, and he just kind of wants to know what the world, the universe out there has to say about that, or what information, what's some useful information regarding that. Leaving it kind of a general question surrounding opening up an Etsy shop. So I just, if I were to do this, which I don't do, but if I were to do this, I just shuffle until you get that. The more that you read of anything, you get really, should be getting more in tune with your own self. And there's a point in which you just feel like, okay, there, that's it, right? That's done. I'm done shuffling. And then I just start laying from here. Because it's a small deck, I don't tend to split. Because I side split like this, I kind of drop split. There's a chance that, especially if I'm doing a larger reading, that I'm not going to have the cards, enough of the cards. Now, in the end, you could say, well, it doesn't matter. Lay the cards that are there, which is the truth. Again, I don't worry about this because I don't read this way. But if I did, for Lenormand, playing card decks, I don't know, cartomancy style decks, I tend to just deal off the top. But you deal however you would normally deal things. But I'm going to deal off the top. I may have to move the things around so we can see it. Oh, it looks like it's going to fit. Okay. I know where I can really get this where it's less of an angle here going on, but I think it's enough to be able to at least see. Okay. So now in this case, we haven't placed the middle card. So we're going to look to the middle card, which is the rider, which means two things. Now this is, again, I think this comes down to experiential and you just starting to get like a relationship with Lenormand. I always kind of smile when I see the rider come up significantly, because for me, it's literally Lenormand saying, listen, pay attention, I'm about to give you a message. There's a cheekiness to Lenormand. It's more so with Sibylla. Sibylla is extremely cheeky, but cartomancy in general is a little bit cheeky. And so whenever the rider card comes up in a significant position like this, it's a little bit of a, listen to me, I'm about to tell you something you should pay attention to. Again, it's just me. That's not how you have to read it, but that's what happens when I see that. So to some degree, that's a little message saying, I've got something to say. It's like we're locked in. We've got this. Now pay attention. I'm going to tell you something. Sit down and listen to my story, right? So Auntie's saying, come sit down. I'm going to tell you what you need to do here. But in general, outside of that personal quirk for me, it can just be that idea that there, right now, pay attention to messages that are going to be coming to you about this, that there may be something that pops. And usually the rider is fairly quick, right? So timing wise, the rider is usually it's the Pony Express. It's that horse rider that's going as fast as he can to get the message out. So you, in the next little while, pay attention to signs or messages that might come up that about whether this is an opportunity to jump on right away or something like that. But I usually just say, kind of stick it in the back of your mind and be paying attention to something that might pop up. Now, obviously, in the upper left-hand corner, we have the Sun card. So as a general message, before I even look at the rest of the cards, I'm going to say that overall, the universe giving you a thumbs up and saying, this is a good idea. This is something that maybe you don't have all the details lined out. Maybe there's things that have to be done, but in an overarching sense, this looks like this is a good idea. And this is without looking at the future cards, right? Because this is the overall energy that is being related to the question. And so the future cards may say there's some work that we need to do here to really get this to where it's going to work. But no matter what, and I see there's a coffin card here, there's a scythe card here, even though I see that in my peripheral vision, the answer for me is still going to be for that person that this is a good idea. For Mr. Lloyd, who's right here, this is a good idea. Whatever your idea is for your shop, you're moving in the right direction with it. There may be some stuff that you've got to iron out, but general sense, this is a good idea. So before I look at anything else, that's because that's the strongest positive card in the entire deck. And so to have it show up in a position of the overall theme has a lot of weight for me personally as a reader. So there's that. So then we go to the corners. So now we have that sunshine we're just talking about pulling up the scythe card, because the sun card has the ability to pull. Just like the clouds can pull things down, the sun card can lift anything up, a difficult card up. So we do see that it's going to be difficult. Making a business, no matter what it is always got its hard work that's involved. And you even think about the scythe. The scythe isn't, I know we think of it as, oh, it's a bloody instrument, oh, something bad and painful is going to happen. The scythe card is a card of physical work. It's a scythe that usually, this is my case for the beautiful scythe card. It's one of my favorite cards. You almost always see a sheath of wheat. That's not a battle taking place. This is work that has to be taken in order for abundance to come in. It's physical labor. So this, to me, especially in this question, indicates there's some hard work that's going to be involved here, but in the end, it's going to be harvesting something. So that's always a good thing. We do, but what now, this is a great example of the coffin. So here's the coffin card. There is the end of something. The end of what? Anxiety. So the bird card is about anxiety, your brain going, and so some of the joy and the abundance that may be coming is just putting an end to the stress about it, which is, again, Lenormand's great at saying, stop worrying, like just quit. That's great. Thank you. It doesn't help, to just turn things off. But we have the sense that some hard work is going to harvest what it is that you might want to get out of achieving this. And some of that hard work and that what you're going to harvest could be the end of anxiety. So you can think about this in general. If we're opening a side business, obviously we hope that that's going to make money, or we wouldn't be putting things on Etsy or doing that kind of thing. So in the end, what you harvest from that hard work might contribute to having less anxiety, because maybe it helps with financial things, or maybe in terms of needing to do something and having busyness and having a focus, that can actually bring something that is in the long run going to reduce anxiety that's there. So we see that with the corner cards. Then we go to look at the cross cards around here, and we see that there is a weight, right? So the cross is involved, so that we does indicate there's some heaviness or some burdens there. Could this be a financial burden? Sure, because we're talking about jobs and we're talking about money, but there's all kinds of things that can be burdens. And part of the burden here, though, because now we got something to qualify that, part of the burden might be for you is, where's this going? Is this going to really take me? The snake card is, here I am, this is where I want to get to, and it's not really clear. How long is this going to take to be successful? How long is it going to take so that at least the work that I'm expending is coming back in terms of sales and things of that nature? So the weight here is that sense of uncertainty, of really not knowing whether things are going to work out or not. Actually, you know what? I've got this backwards. Here's the coffin. Look at, we got an upside down coffin. That's the whip card. Here is an example of why I don't like cards that look similar to each other. I thought that was the coffin card. But that's not. So let's backtrack. And this is a good example. What happens when you do this, right? Especially if you're a professional reader. We do have a lot of people in the class that are professional readers. So I want to address this, because this is what I do. And this does happen. If you do enough readings for other people, you are going to mistake something, especially if you use a lot of different tarot decks, a lot of different Lenormand decks where they change things. I promise this will happen. And if you're doing it live, obviously there's nothing you can do about it but just plow through it. If you are filming it, you could, obviously edit it out and go back and fix it. It's too much work to do that, number one. And there's two things that I say. This is exactly how I address it when it happens. What I just said stands. I never retract what I've said in a reading, because for whatever reason, that is what came out in the midst of a reading. And so I am very clear, both for myself and for the client, that I don't retract what I just said, because that happens. If you believe in synchronicity, if you're doing readings for the purpose of laying down cards and getting messages, for whatever reason, that occurs and you get a message from it, and you should go with that. I don't believe in rescinding a message that you got. You'll have to make a decision for yourself. If you're in the middle of doing a reading for yourself and you're like, oh, dang it, I just messed that up. It was the, Three of Swords, not the Three of Wands. They both look like wands sticking out, and I just got messed up on that. I'm going to erase all that. I'm going to lay out a new set of cards. I just screwed the reading up. that's up to you how you decide to do that. For myself, I really recommend don't ever do that. You got a message for a reason. Take the message and then keep moving forward and see what else you're going to get over doing your second layer. So that's how I approach it. It will happen. So figure out for yourself, again, especially as professional readers. It's embarrassing as a professional reader. You're thinking, oh shoot, that's looks horrible. No, it doesn't. If you're just open about it and you're just yeah, screwed that up, listen to that message. And in many ways, and I've had this happen, in many ways, that initial message that you got, the client will end up saying that was a key part of the reading for them. And so that if you're doing readings, you believe in synchronicity, you believe in messages that need to come out. And so by backtracking and negating it or erasing it or whatever, or redoing the reading, you've taken an opportunity for that person to hear something that they needed to hear. And so I just highly recommend that you just, yeah, that happened. Listen to what I just said. And in fact, put an exclamation point on what I just said, and then carry on and do your reading and continue to do your reading. So thank you, Mr. Lloyd, for giving that opportunity. So I'm saying the same thing to Mr. Lloyd. Everything I just said just stands, but let's take a peek now, knowing what we also know that we said. So this is actually a whip, which is interesting because this isn't the whip. I'm bad with my numbers. Let's look this up. This is going to be the whip, or it's going to be the flowers. I don't memorize numbers. So let's go back here. I don't think any of this is in English. So it's a bouquet. Let me just make sure here. Which is the clee, which doesn't tell me anything. I think this is the bouquet. This is going to be the flowers. It looks like a broom. It could be a whip. It could be a broom. And in modern decks, I feel like most of the time you can tell the difference. There is one deck that I have that I absolutely love that has a table with something on it, and you can't tell what it is. And I think it's actually the whip that's sitting on a table. And so that is really confusing when you're doing it. So this is even better for you with the bouquet. This is great things that are coming your way, but it's still with work, right? And I would still read this as you've got great, good things coming your way here. Great things. This is 11 though. See, people, let's pause. Let's pause here for a minute and grab my book. I'm a horrible person with numbers. Let's grab our book here. This is the whip. Okay. So that's the whip on, see, look at this though. Would you think of that as a whip? I guess if you're going to get whipped with something, it's a bundle of rods. They used to beat people with rods and whips. And so that's why in Lenormand, you have, some people will say, oh, it's a broom, it's a thing, something like that, but it's actually a bundle of sticks that they would hit people with. So it's still a form of punishment. Oh, sorry, Lisa, yes. Lisa's saying, it's the whip. And this is also, is this a 2? Because you can write 2 this way, or is this 11? But this is a flowery set of bundle of whips to be beaten with. So, okay, all right, we got it. See, this is why you just roll with it. Things happen, people. We're all human beings. Okay, so let's go back. Again, what I said stands, but let's go back and read it with that. So that's another bit of information he gets. So we still have the sun card. We still have, he needs to do the hard work because this is what's going to harvest. But we have a mess. Now we have a warning here that says that perhaps in the past you've started things or gone to want to do things that haven't worked out so well for you. There are patterns perhaps in the past that haven't panned out for you in what you've tried to do in trying to start things. And so now we have a warning that says, just be careful that you don't fall back into those past patterns because that's not going to serve you. And in fact, in this case, it's going to cause anxiety. It's going to cause this to not be a successful venture, that you can enjoy the process, but it's going to be anxiety inducing. So that's another layer to the message that you can now get, is to just, and we usually know those about ourselves. We know where we kind of slip up and we do things the same way over and over again. And we're like, why did I do that again? And this is that warning that says, be careful of that as you're going into this venture. So there goes our, oh yeah, we all have those things, but I do love, that's why, again, the whip card is so important, because we are creatures of habit. We fall back into patterns. And so turning that into the broom pattern, the broom still works in the case that it's repetitive patterns. But the whip and the idea, even though we obviously don't in the modern times like the idea of corporal punishment and these types of things, the message behind that is still relevant today, and that we do fall into making choices and decisions, because the idea of punishment should be, obviously, somebody did something wrong and they were punished for it. Even though we don't use corporal punishment, or most of us don't approve of corporal punishment, the concept of doing something that has negative consequences is still important in today. And so having that concept and not removing that because, oh, it's a whip card, we don't want to think about whips and corporal punishment, be careful to just like turn that into something positive, because we still make choices and decisions that have consequences, and they might be patterns of making bad choices that have consequences, and we want to be able to be warned of that. It's one of the benefits of that card. Colleen asked, could we keep beating ourselves up? There's an actual deck, I want to say it's the mystical Lenormand, where it has like a priest, because they used to flagellate, they may still do it, I don't know, but that idea of flagellating yourself, and it's an actual image of somebody whipping themselves, because generally we are our own, we don't need somebody to whip us, we generally are real good at doing that ourselves. So yes, that can certainly be a pattern of making poor decisions or whatever, and just kind of being our own worst enemy by beating ourselves up over having continually made decisions. So yeah, that can certainly be part of it. But in a general sense, it's that idea of past just kind of falling back into making bad decisions over and over again, and wanting to get out of that cycle versus being stuck in that cycle. So we have that with the corners. Now let's redo this out now, going back around to this being the actual coffin, right? So here we have the main, again, we're doing a bit of a sequence, like one of the ways that we did it last week was sequence, following a sequence. So we have the sense of weight that's going on, because why? Because of the uncertainty of where things are going. We have things that are moving though in a positive direction, and that coming to an end. Well, what's coming to an end isn't this. What's coming to the end is what's the beginning of the sequence, what this is about. This is about that sense of weight that you might be feeling about, should I start this, should I not start this? I don't know if I should start this business because I don't know, I'm uncertain of where it's going to go. But this is actually going to probably take you in a good direction. And so that brings an end to that burden. When you start to see things start to pan out, obviously the weight of that is going to go away. So knowing whether you're reading in a sequential or if you're reading in pairs is important, because how do we read this depends on how we're reading what we're doing. So if I'm reading it as a sequence, which says, I'm building a message here, the focus starts with the cross. So the focus of this message is on the weightedness that Lloyd might be feeling, because he's uncertain about whether or not this is really going to help him or not, or this is really going to pan out in the end. We can see, and also my brain also knows this is in the future, right? We know that the direct future for him is that things are going to start going well. It's going to pan out. And so this burden of uncertainty is going to come to an end. Knowing how you're doing that is important, because I'm putting the emphasis on the cross, the weight that he's feeling and why he's feeling that, so that I know that the cross for me in this reading relates to that main energy here. But if you're reading in a different way, where you're reading, say, sets, you might say, okay, you've got a burden that is because you're feeling uncertain, and then you're going over here and you're reading, okay, it's going to start out really good, but then that's going to come to an end. That's a different message than if you're reading it sequentially. So knowing how you're approaching that is important, so that you, again, do it consistently, and how you read it becomes consistent, and it helps to make it easy to, when you have a weird ending, how do you read that? Is this going to start good and end badly, or is it the fact that this burden here is going to come to an end? So being clear about how you're reading, that's why it's real important to start to have a rhythm and a pattern to how you read things, so that you can get a consistent way of reading it. And you're not just picking and choosing. You're not saying, okay, well, I don't want this good thing to come to an end, so I'm going to read it this way. It needs to be that this is the way that you read, so that you can have that sense of consistency. Am I reading this correctly? Am I getting the right messages here? Or am I just picking the way that's going to come out the best because that's how I want it to come out? So hopefully that makes sense. So then quickly, if we look above, we see again the sun. Things are going to rise on this sense of uncertainty, but it's tied with the broom. For me, that the idea of things rising up and the uncertainty getting better and getting a sense of confidence and abundance here is really tied. Oh, something's happening. I think my phone is ringing. Let me double click this. Oh, just a minute. There we go. Hopefully that brings that back and doesn't happen again. There we go. Can everybody see that again? Okay. Okay, so yeah, so for me, that's how I would read this. I have that sense that the uncertainty is going to clear away with the sun rising, but it's really tied with you not making those decisions that have caught you in the past to not being successful in what you're trying to incorporate. And then we have going on below, this is where the coffin card again is in a good way. We have anxiety that's ending with hard work, because I'm looking at this scythe card is more that's that manual labor. There is just elbow grease that's going to have to come into doing this, and so some of that anxiety of starting something new is going to come to an end by just getting in there and doing the work that has to be done. In terms of the future card, now this is where people can read this in a lot of different ways, right? Because technically we have two what people would see as negative cards. Again, I don't consider the coffin card or the scythe or the coffin card to be negative. I consider them to be neutral depending on what the question is being asked. But certainly the whip card generally is never going to be seen as a positive card. However, you have a very positive card in terms of this is a card of here's the way things are. You're moving to a place in which things are better. And so that's there. And for me, the scythe card is, yep, it's going to be hard work. Might even be a little bit painful at times, but it is going to harvest. You're going to harvest something out of it. So the main message for me here is that, yep, this is especially with this being here, this is a good idea. This is something you should pursue, but this is important because it's also in the future card that says just be really careful that your past patterns don't mess up what you're trying to accomplish in the future. So that's how I would read that. In another reader, right? Another reader might see both of these cards as negative and might see this as a positive card and say, yeah, probably would still say things are moving in a good direction, but we do have, a stronger negative bent in saying there are some potential trip ups here. Be aware of those. But I would guess that, and again, I don't know because I can't guess how other people would read. With this being here, and with this being here, I would think they would still come to the conclusion that the potential here is high for this being successful in some way. It's just there are things that are going to have to be worked out. So I guess I can't really get in somebody else's head how they read it. But I think if you see both of these as very negative versus neutral, that can change how you read. So again, making sure that you know how you read particular cards is important, so that you can A, get the message if you're reading for yourself, and B, if you're reading for somebody else, be able to explain that in a clear way so that they know you're not just, well, what? This is a scythe card. I've always heard the scythe card is something wretched. But if you're confident in how you read something, you say, this is what the scythe card is. This is what it means to me. This is how I read it. And you can then more confidently be able to give them the message that they need to receive. So, yeah. So that's for Mr. Lloyd. Thank you for Mr. Lloyd for giving us an example of how to read when you mess up, and also how be careful of seeing negative cards in a 9-card spread and automatically going to, okay, well, this is going to be instantly, this is going to be a no, or this is going to be, make sure you're going through those steps, because how those are read are really going to be dependent on where they show up in those sequences, as to whether or not they are a warning or whether or not they are part of something that's going to end anxiety or end something that's negative. And also the understanding that warning cards are important. We actually want warning cards to come up because they give us information that we can have action on. So Lloyd can say, okay, I'm going to go into this, but I'm going to be aware of paying attention to past patterns, or making sure I don't make the same mistakes over and over again. He now has information to make a better choice going into putting up the shop by saying, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to be aware that I could ease, so I'm going to check myself. And so we don't want readings that never have warning cards in them, because that is actionable information. If you believe in a future that is in flux, that is actionable information that can help us make decisions. And even if you believe in a fixed future, warnings are still important, right? If you believe that the future is pretty set, I think most people believe there's wiggle room, but if you do believe in a pretty strong sense of fate and destiny, having a heads up of that is still important, because you can at least prepare for things and be better able to meet the things that are coming your way. So I think in either way that you see the future, having warning cards are so important, and we shouldn't ever be like, oh crap. We should be like, okay, let's deal with this face on, see what's here, so that I can now start to make different choices and decisions, or navigate around those things. So I really like to make a case in both Lenormand or tarot or anything for embracing of getting those kinds of cards that give us a heads up. So hopefully this is how I know I was really thinking I'd be able to pull it off in like, a little over 2. We're going into the 3rd, but I hope that seeing it in action does help to be able to see how you can navigate this. I would say for this coming week, and again, remember, you can pick one of your 9-card readings and send it to me. I think I have most everybody's done. I think somebody's select one at the end I might still need to do, but if you make use of that if you want to. Again, as I was saying, not to call out poor Chris, but I have a better chance of seeing it quickly if you send it to my email with Lenormand homework, because I have that set to notify me very well. So if you want to make sure that I see it, I think it's great to share it in the group, because I think it helps everybody, but also maybe send it to me in email format, just so I make sure that I want to be able to make sure I get it back to you. So if you do a 9-card, do a few of them and pick one out. Again, make sure that you put your interpretation on it. I don't read that first. I just do what I'm going to do, and then I look at that and give you a heads up. There's never a point in which I'm going to say your reading is wrong, because that's your message, but it gives you another way of being able to view the cards that can sometimes help. So I'll check. Yeah, I know I saw 1 or 2 that I still need to hit, so I will get those to you. But make sure you do that. But I think in your handouts, it's got the step-by-step. So even if you've already a Lenormand reader kind of has your way of doing things, I would at least do a couple like that, kind of stepping your way through the process, just so you can see that there is a lot that you can garner out of a 9-card. And because, again, you're really doing a mini grand tableau when you're doing that. And so learning those steps can really help to solidify when we jump into doing the grand tableau, which should be next week. We'll start, I think the next 2 weeks will be working through grand tableaus, which are fantastic. I know that there are a few people who have never done a grand tableau, so that makes me excited. So, and they're no harder than what we just did. So, and I know there are people who are stressed over the grand tableau a lot, but it's no harder than what we just did. And so it's just bigger, but it's not any different. So don't worry about it and just focus on your 9 card this week. And again, if you order your reader and do it your own way, I just ask that you try a couple times to step through the steps to get familiar with that as we move into the grand tableau. I think that's everything. I can't think of anything else. So next week, oh, somebody did ask, yes, we are having live chat at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So I'm going to go stop talking for a couple minutes before I go into talking again. Yeah, we'll get to the houses, and there are ways, and we'll talk about the houses also at the last class. You can actually do houses with your with a 9 card. I don't do that very often because I feel like you can get so much out of a 9 card as it is. I know, Jasmine, they get longer. And you would think this is, I think with Lenormand, I don't know if this is my 2nd class or my 3rd time going through Lenormand. Now, Geomancy, I think I've done the most because I started with it. Anyway, you'd think it would get more succinct, but no. What are your thoughts on using app versions of Lenormand? Apps in general, I know I should just accept that they're 3 hours. I really try to go for the 2 hours, but originally I thought, oh, they'd be 1 hour classes. And I was like, no, that's not going to happen. So then it went to the 2, but anyways, apps, to me, it's not about accuracy so much, because if you think about it, throwing your cards down are random, right? I believe that, let's say I'm going to do a tarot reading and I lay out 3 cards. I believe that any 3 cards that I lay out is going to have something to say about any situation that occurs, because it's less about what those 3 cards are and what those things snap into my own mind and my own way of thinking. It brings out the message. So I think that any card has a message to say. So it doesn't really, in essence, it doesn't matter whether I've shuffled them and laid them down, or if I use an app to shuffle them. It's still a random happenstance that comes up. So in a technical sense, I don't think it matters whether you use an app or you use a deck of cards. Saying that, I do think there is something about holding cards, shuffling cards, having that sense of knowing when to stop shuffling the cards, splitting the cards, laying the cards down. There is something about the process of that, that the more that you do it, you sort of build up this routine that you do, and that puts you in that zone, and it drops you into that message that you don't get when you use an app and you push a shuffle button and you get it. So I don't use them. I use an app for learning. Like a lot of times I'll have a deck that I don't have the guidebook, and so I'll get the app for the guidebook, or I'll use them for when I was practicing a particular, doing like the within without advice at the end of the day. Sometimes I just lay in bed and throw one up, and just this is how I'd read it. But I don't use them to do readings. If I'm sitting somewhere stuck in a hotel and I didn't have my deck, would I use one just to be able to do a reading? Sure. But I wouldn't use them for a client. And if it was an important question for me, I probably still wouldn't use them. So, so logically, I would say, yes, zooming in on cards like Shadowscape. So I do use them, I have them. But so logically, I would say anything that randomizes a set of cards is what you're doing when you're shuffling and laying them out. And so technically, you aren't getting anything better out of using a physical set of cards versus an app. So I don't think they're bad. I don't think they're the devil. I don't think, the end of all things. I don't think that they're making our collections any less than they are. Certainly doesn't affect my collection. Same thing, same types of things you get from when Kindle came out. Like, oh, it's going to be the death of all books and we're never going to read again. So I don't think they're horrible. And I think that people use them and get amazing readings from them. Me personally, I still think there's a bit of magic in touching your cards and shuffling your cards and getting that zing when it's time to stop shuffling. That to me is a bit of magic. And so I do, I prefer physical cards over app cards. And I would never use them for a client unless I was in that situation. Again, if I was in a situation where I simply didn't have one, and my daughter called me and said, I need you to lay some cards out, would I grab an app? Sure, because she's still going to get a message, but my preference is having a deck of cards in my hand, because of that bit of connective magic there. So that's the best I can answer on that. If that's all somebody has, use what you have. Like, that's why we have cartomancy, because somebody wanted to ask a question and they picked up a deck of cards because that's what they had and they did a reading with it. That's why we have runes, because somebody picked up the alphabet they had at hand and they did some magic with it. People picked up bones, people pick up sticks, people pick up everything. It's the shows the questing mind of human beings, that we will pick up what's next to us and we will use it to ask questions. And in 50 years, maybe these are be gone and everybody's got a bunch of digital cards, right? And instead of this. So I don't think that there's anything bad about it, but as long as I have them, I'll be picking up the cards myself. There. So anyways, that's a long rambly answer, and this is why our classes are 3 hours. I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Again, save up any questions. I always say I'm going to save up time for questions at the end, and I never have it. But if you have questions, like, email them to me. If you're not watching this live, if you're watching this back, email them to me if you have questions, and I'll make sure to answer them next week. Or if I've missed a question, ask it in group, or save it up for next week, and we'll answer it as we can. So have a wonderful rest of your week, and some of you I'll see in a little bit in live chat. Talk to you later. See if I